All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the Commercial Aviation Work Group meeting. Work group members and members of the public, please be sure to sign in at the appropriate sign-in sheets near the door. There is one sheet for members and another for the public. For members of the public in person, please remain seated and silent throughout the meeting and silence your phones. There will be an opportunity for public comment from 2:15 p.m. to 2:45 p.m., and I will alternate between in-person and online. Work group members, please speak clearly and loudly throughout the meeting so those in person and online can hear you. And hybrid meetings do come with unique challenges, so I do appreciate everyone's cooperation and patience if any technical difficulties arise. Work group members online, please keep your video on and microphone on mute unless you are speaking during the meeting. And if you have a comment or question during the meeting, please speak freely during the meeting or use the hand raise button. And as a reminder, members of the public will be muted online unless you are called on during public comment, in which I will unmute you. And for those in person, the emergency exit is located in the back of the room, and the restrooms can also be found in the back to the left. Now I will pass it on to John to do a quick intro before we get started.
Well, she's already stolen my thunder there and there. Welcome to Boeing Field. We're so glad we can host you today, and wish you the best of luck in your endeavors. And if there's anything you need while you're here, give us a call. We got Alan here in the technical booth, and if you don't have any questions, I'll let you get to work.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Okay, we'll be back for Dave's tour later this afternoon. Okay.
All right. Well, good morning and welcome, everyone. I'm Evan Norby, chair of the group. As we typically do, let's go around and introduce everybody who's in the room, and then we'll call on the members who are appearing online as well. I don't have a list of them in front of me who's online, but Christina can call on them. So let's start down here to my right.
Charlie Reardon, I work for American Aviation Professionals, and I'm a representative of the airline industry. Business is dependent upon the air service.
Forrest Dunham, I'm a citizens representative. Rich Mueller, Airport Director, Grant County International Airport, and I represent a port on the east side of the mountains with a very long runway.
Good. I'm Ann Richard. I'm the WashDOT Aviation Director, and I'm the non-voting member from WashDOT.
Right. And I'm Evan Norby. I'm a citizen representative.
I represent a community organization, the citizen representative.
Gary Word, I'm a representative from Eastern Washington. I live in Yakima.
And Arif Gauss, port representative for the Port of Seattle.
All right. And then Christina, what members do we have online? Which one?
Buck Taft. And I did see Alan. Oh, Alan Adel. And you should be able to unmute yourselves. Both Buck and Alan.
Oh, and Ben as well.
Yeah, I'm Buck Taft. I'm the director of the Tri-Cities Airport in Pasco, Washington, and I represent the Washington Public Ports Association.
I'm Alan Adolph. I'm the Regional Transportation Manager for Yakima Valley Conference of Governments. I'm a non-voting member representing MPO RTPOs in Eastern Washington.
And Ben Brookman, Managing Director of Real Estate for Alaska Airlines, representing airlines.
Anyone else online? All right. Turning to review the agenda. At our last meeting, we had our typical discussion at the end of the meeting about kind of ideas for the next meeting. But in between then and now, we had our consultant selection process completed. It made sense to me in putting the agenda together, working with Ann and Christina, and then input from anyone, that really focusing this meeting on introducing our consultant, and then talking about with the consultant present how we saw a work plan for 2026 developing in light of both what the legislature has directed us in the ESSB 5161 and then the prior bill and then the the prior committee's work and things. The consultant RFQ largely repeats ESSB 5161. So I had read them both and went, well, there's no reason to go over both to each other. So that's how I put the agenda together. I allowed the nice block of time here in the morning for the consultant to introduce himself. And I understand you have a slide deck for us.
Yep.
Great.
I have about 15 slides, just to maybe spur some thinking and thought for the afternoon.
Great. And then that'll take us to lunch. And then after lunch, we have a list of topics, but I've taken notes on the essentially what the legislature's asked us to do in 5161, and we can kind of dive into that point by point. And then we public comment, and then our tour. So that should take up the chunk of the day. Okay. Turning to the appointments and pending non-voting member invitations. So last night when I went to the governor's boards and commissions page, there seemed to be a glitch on their website, and neither our group's members nor any others were loading. So usually we can look at the current status and see if anyone new was appointed recently. I'll kind of get an update on that. But that was not available. So unless anyone knows anecdotally of anyone new appointed or anyone dropping off the group, I know of one who I think is leaving, but Gary, you had sent me an email about that.
Yeah, Robert Hodgman is no longer Yakima Airport Director, so he, by default, is no longer a non-voting member.
Mr. Chairman, you know, I think we have a spot on our board that is specifically set for the Spokane Airport Director, and the new one has been appointed, just started a couple of weeks ago. So I think we need to contact him and explain to him that he's required to be on this.
His name is Dave Herring. I've known Dave since he was an intern in college. And so I have reached out to him and told him that he's expected to do this and sent him a link to the governor's office website where he can fill out the application. So that's underway.
And then, so Mr. Hodgman, then my recollection is I don't remember if we had a spot for the Yakima director or if he was invited to fill the Eastern Washington Airport, the shorter runway, I guess.
He was a representative from Eastern Washington Regional Airport.
As a non-voting member.
As a non-voting member. So a replacement for him could be anyone, but according to the newspaper in Yakima, they have the two finalists and they intend to make a selection for Mr. Hodgman's replacement and be ready to go by 1st of January. So just something to think about unless somebody has some other ideas for that position.
Well, does anyone have any other thoughts, or should we can wait and invite the new Yakima director? Surprise.
That worked for Ann.
Okay.
I might make one other comment, Mr. Chair. The representative from Washington State Aviation Alliance, currently, aside from Rich, who is a member, I believe, but is Neil Stredge. Is that right, Neil? Or Rich, how do you pronounce his name?
I'm sorry, say again.
Neil Stratton, but I don't think he's from the Alliance.
He was the business.
No, even with the change in elections.
Is he from Ports? But at any rate, I don't remember him being at any of our meetings.
It's the very first meeting in July.
Was he?
Like the very
Like the very first meeting in July of 24.
Okay. So do we just leave that alone or, he's Washington State, Aviation Alliance. That's who he's with, I believe.
No,
No?
he's, what's on here? It's a business.
Yeah. Business roundtable.
Something like that.
That sounds.
It's a representative from a statewide business association.
Or is the NBAA?
No, it's not an aviation.
Non-aviation. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So where does that leave us for vacancies?
Well, if I may, you did mention Aviation Alliance, and they are interested in being represented on the group. But they've had a little bit of turnover recently, so they've been kind of hard pressed to kind of finger a representative, but I think that they're in a good position to do that now.
Warren
Hendrickson.
Hendrickson is the new president of the WSAA. And with his duties at the Port of Olympia, I don't think that he'd necessarily be the person, but he would be the one to ask. And I can certainly do that since I'm.
And I think he would be a good choice if he has the time and is willing because of his prior experience with the Commercial Aviation Coordinating Commission. I think it's nice to have that kind of flavor on our board, whether we agree with what they did or not.
I spoke to Warren after our last meeting, and I think I tried to tee up a meeting between Evan and he was either supposed to call you, Evan, or waiting for a call from you just to chat. But I believe he's interested.
Okay. I will follow up.
And I can give you his data.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds good.
And then there's one other vacancy that's been out there for a while. The Washington State Department of Commerce. There's a non-voting member representing commerce, and we had invited somebody, and just as we invited her, she left her position. So we've been waiting to hear from Commerce who the appropriate person will be, and have now heard from him, Stephen Polonsky, and he may be. I invited him to. Yeah, I think he's on the video joining us. So he's eager and ready for us to invite him right back.
What is the name, Ann?
Stephen Polonsky.
Good morning, Stephen Polonsky. I'm Senior Energy Policy Specialist for Clean Transportation with the Washington State Department of Commerce. I'm based in Spokane.
Right. Well, good morning, Mr. Polonsky.
Stephen, you had some other interesting experiences that recommended you for this too. Do you want to share about that?
Some odd aviation odds and ends in my background. I published, I'm an author on policy implications of vertiports. I volunteer with the Civil Air Patrol. I'm a panelist for the Airport Cooperative Research Program of the Transportation Research Board. I'm an FAA licensed drone pilot. And one I hadn't told you is my grandfather was a naval rigger, an aviation rigger on the Navy Curtiss planes. I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. Looking forward to today.
Okay, cool. Well, so when we've invited non-voting members in the past, I think the actual task of putting a letter together and sending it, Christina, you handled that. As I recall, putting letters together to invite non-voting members.
Yeah. Let me know who to invite and their emails.
Okay. Great. Well, Polonsky, and then I'll talk to Warren Hendrickson, and then we'll have Mr. Herring, and then TBD Yakima director. And then there are probably some other openings. There have been some that are sort of long standing, but not having the current lists from the governor's website, unless anyone else remembers.
We still have this kind of ongoing situation where some of us who were appointed, our appointments have expired. And I reapplied last July and still haven't heard anything. So
I filed my reapplication also.
So we just keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, until someone shows up and tells us to stop, I guess.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, how many people have gotten reappointed, or how many do we still think might be even legal?
Well, that's what I went to check on the governor's website last night, and it must be some glitch between the web and the database that website hits to get all that updated info, because it just loaded. I mean, every commission, not just ours, but others, were just loading as blank. So
I'm appointed, or I've been renewed.
I've been renewed.
yeah.
How many people?
There are currently 7 members who are expired. But lest anyone gets concerned about that, I just want to remind everyone that both the governor's office and members of the legislature who are on the work group said, don't worry about that. It's bureaucracy, but keep on going until somebody tells you otherwise.
And is Rich's date a typo, or you only got 6 months?
No, that was the original. The idea was to offset everybody from each other. So I drew the short straw on that one. I am still on. I actually thought my renewal was in, but apparently not. So I will at least do my part, and we'll see what happens on the other end, but still happy to serve.
I think since we're not far enough along that will cause anything for the attorneys to get involved, we're probably still okay.
I don't want to get sued.
Yeah, I don't either.
So unless we want to talk any more about the vacancy membership situation, do we have any other updates before we move on to the consultant presentation? No, sir. All right, hearing none. All right, I'd like to hand the floor over to our selected consultant to give the presentation, and if folks should think of questions. He said, we should have time for questions toward the end of this block, and maybe set up our conversation for the afternoon about 2026 work plan. So,
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt, but before we start, can we kind of just do a recap of how many companies bid, how many were interviewed, and then, because everybody doesn't know about the application process, and then say hi to our team members.
Since Ann managed the procurement process, that it'd be more accurate than I could come up with on the fly. I'm going to ask Ann to.
Thank you, Charlie. I wasn't exactly prepared for this. So, I believe we had 5 or 6 proposals, and we had kind of 2 review committees that you all selected. There was a group to review proposals, which pared it down to the ones who would be interviewed. I think we interviewed 3 teams.
I recall
2 teams. Okay, yeah. All right. They were pretty much all teams that proposed, but I think it was pretty unanimous that the winning proposer was the team led by CNS Engineers, which has an office here in Seattle, but they do work all over the country. So Mark Champney is the project manager for that team. And anything else? Any other questions that I missed, Charlie?
Oh, no, not at all. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Champney, do you have the ability to share? Yes, you have screen sharing. Okay.
Working on that. I think we should be good. So, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to work and support the commercial aviation work group, our team. We have most of our leadership, me and Vicki are here today. Cody's also from CNS, and then 2 other leaders, Steve Van Beek and Peter Kirsch, should be online, and they'll be chiming in as we go here too. But appreciate the selection. We're really looking forward to kind of diving in here to help you, support you on a lot of the issues that you may want to look into a little bit deeper. So what we did is we're close to being under contract. So we're not quite there. So we did put together some slides here that were kind of based on some of the information we did for the interview, but certainly we haven't really dove into a lot of the issues and stuff. But hopefully, I set this up in a way here that will maybe encourage the conversation and discussion this afternoon on certain things you want to talk about and keep in mind. So not a lot of slides. It might look like it's a little bit more here, but just a few introductions that will go around and talk to the team. Briefly mention some of the experience with some other systems that this team has worked on that we think will benefit us. Our approach to, at least our initial approach to maybe how to manage this as we get maybe some multiple task orders and different things going on to keep everything in order and really not try to repeat some of the stuff that may have already been done in the region as well. Steve Van Beek's going to share some transport and aviation trends that might be helpful at a very high level. And then share, our understanding of the role of the work group, and then some questions that maybe the work group can use to consider, and like I said, in your conversations this afternoon, as well as kind of moving forward from here. And feel free to interrupt me at any time. I do have some time at the end for discussion, but I don't mind. So the four primary folks that we've identified, myself, I'm Mark Champney. Program director with CNS companies, and really kind of view my role on this team as kind of the orchestrator to help pull the resources, the expertise that will be needed to get certain things accomplished for you. Been in the industry for about 30 years, all the aviation, a little bit of DOT time back in New York State, but mostly on the advisory consulting side throughout my career. I'll let Vicki Lawson introduce herself.
Yep. Hi, all. I'm Vicki. I think we all met on the interview. Thank you. We're excited to, Mark and I and Cody are excited to be here today. I'll be leading engagement, communication, supporting some of the, not doing the research, but supporting and facilitating some of the research. So,
great.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Steve, you should be able to unmute yourself if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Great. Thank you. I'm Steve Van Beek. I'm the North American Aviation Director for Steer. Today, I sit just across the river in Virginia from Washington, D.C. And for that reason, you might guess, you'd be right, that I do quite a bit of policy and regulatory work in Washington. I also do a lot of work with airport authority boards and leadership team, setting strategic direction with them, and also have quite a bit of experience with air rail projects and working in both Seattle and Spokane as a consultant. Thank you.
Peter, you should have the ability to unmute and introduce yourself.
Good morning. This is Peter Kirsch. I'm a law firm. I'm a lawyer. I'm a law firm. I'm a lawyer with a law firm of Kaplan Kirsch. I split my time between Denver and the other Washington, though, as some of you know, I spend most of my time on airplanes around the country, advising airports on development projects, governance issues, a whole range of matters. And I've been doing airport work for 35, almost 40 years now. I do a lot of work in Western Washington for a number of the airports there as well. So looking forward to the opportunity to zoom out and look at the big picture of what's going on in Western Washington. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve and Peter. And as I go along here too, if you either of you feel the need to chime in, feel free to just do that as we go. So just covering four primary firms, CNS companies, as Ann stated. We work nationally on airports across the country in an advisory nature, more from the planning, design, and construction aspect of things. Steer is a global firm, so they bring some of that global experience in the aviation world, but also in the rail and some other modes that we think will be beneficial for this. Kaplan Kirsch brings kind of that legal standpoint to help us out with the regulatory environment, things that we might want to do but might not be able to do or might try to change. And then Stefferson Associates is a local firm here to help us out with the communications and logistics. So With that though, just high level, we built the team intentionally with that depth. So we wanted to bring a lot of resources to this group, and through that and through these firms, we're certainly open if there's needs that we can't fulfill as a consultant team with the 4 firms that we have. We'll are more than willing to bring those onto the team to help the work group get the information that they need and get to the solution. But really, that public governance and engagement aspect of it, the infrastructure and environmental side of the house, and then the policy regulations and standards. So this is the ultimate org chart that we have. As you can see, like I said, there are a lot of resources. I apologize, that's not the biggest. If some of you have it in front of you, you might be able to see a little bit more. But the primary role of me, Steve, Peter, and Vicky kind of being the primary expertise to help support any of the initiatives. We did bring on subject matter experts that addressed each of the primary topics that were mentioned in the RFQ. So as you talk about those later this afternoon, we do have additional staff that are identified at various firms. And then other topics and subject matter experts on the bottom as different things or various topics may arise that you may need expertise, and those range from environmental, climate, sustainability, financial planning, and advanced planning, and then the legal piece of that as well. So, any questions? So, just wanted to briefly mention some of our experience with some other systems. Peter, Steve, and myself, have been involved in very similar topics, but I'll say there's nothing similar about any of these and how they relate to even what you're looking to do here as well. So Steve Van Beek, through I think multiple years, has been involved with the San Diego Regional Airport System. And I'll let him chime in on that here shortly. And then Peter Kirsch has had a big role with Southern Nevada and the second major airport that Clark County is working on in Ivanpah. That's been a start and stop effort over the years. And then my career, I was the project manager for the New England Regional Airport System Plan when Boston was considering a second major airport. They ultimately did not select the site for a second major airport and did something similar to what you're trying to do here, where they looked at, how do they can get more capacity out of the system, the airport and the system in New England. And that's been a fairly successful effort to really help look at, prioritizing funding for different improvement projects that would help that capacity and the efficiency of those airports. So Peter, if you want to go, Peter, if you want to go first, we'll go back up the list and just briefly talk about the Southern Nevada.
Yeah, and I don't want to go into great detail here, but I think it is useful for the work group to appreciate that there are other examples around the country of efforts that look at regional air system with a particular focus on trying to find alternative additional airport capacity. And Southern Nevada, Las Vegas is a good example. Harry Reid International is absolutely penned in. Its ability to grow is quite limited, not quite perhaps as limited as Sea-Tac. Sorry, RF. But it has some real challenges to it. And so beginning literally 25 years ago, Las Vegas area started looking at other ways to meet their commercial aviation needs. And very long story, a very long and convoluted story, making it short, is they are now building a new second commercial airport south of Las Vegas near the California border. The important piece here is that the process that led up to the development of the new Ivanpah Airport is really important. It's important to understand how they got where they got, what those curves and bumps in the road were, because anytime a region looks to add new airport capacity, while everyone is unique and every community is unique, there are certain similarities in terms of the kinds of issues they face. And so I look forward to having conversations later about the battle scars we have from Ivanpah.
Thank you, Peter. Steve?
Yes, thanks to Peter, and we should mention at the top here, I've supported Peter on the Southern Nevada airport initiative for some time, and Mark and I and Peter and Vicky. There's a lot of bilateral connections where we've worked together on projects throughout the country that require communications, law, policy, regulatory, consulting, planning. So this team, one thing I really like about it is it's tried and true as a team and working together to solve problems for clients. And so it's a lot of fun for me to be back sort of with the band again. San Diego is a very interesting place. We think constraints and then we think San Diego. San Diego International Airport sits on 661 acres only. It sits 3 miles from downtown San Diego and is penned in by water on two sides and by development on the other side. As Peter noted, we looked at San Diego as well at regional ways to meet future capacity, to add future capacity to meet demand. And we did so in a kind of unique way. We looked at all the secondary airports in San Diego County, as well as adjacent airports in other counties. And believe it or not, one across the border in Tijuana, Mexico, where today there is a cross-border crossing from San Diego County into Tijuana, and you can actually access a lot of flights from that city into Central and Latin America. And that's a regularly used service by quite a few people who are going to those destinations. And that was sort of signed off on all those years ago in the system plan for San Diego. The other thing we did look at, which could have relevance here, was California high-speed rail and the possibility that you could divert up to 20% of California air traffic to rail, serving both Los Angeles and San Francisco. Now, this was about 15 years ago, so some of the aggressive plans to bring phase 2 of high-speed rail to San Diego have not materialized. But we did look at ways that demand could be met by rail. And Steer, my firm, has also looked at and projected rail in Cascadia, some east-west rail in Washington. And so we've been involved in pretty much every initiative there as well. So bringing that multimodal focus to ways of addressing future demand, I think San Diego does offer some options, Mark.
That's great. Thank you, Steve. So just wanted to highlight some, certainly in the future or other times we can dive into some of those in more detail if there's some things you want to learn more about what was studied there.
Are you going to talk about New England?
I did a little bit. So really what it came down to is, New England's unique, right? There was 11 commercial service airports, 6 state aviation directors, all working together, kind of cooperatively to understand some of the challenges and issues there. Boston at the time was very regional jet heavy and was kind of busting at the seams. Some things have changed there, but a lot of the work of the regional system plan ultimately supported a runway extension down in Providence to allow them to do West Coast service that you used to have to go to Boston prior to them having that capacity. Some improvements up in Manchester, Boston Regional Airport. And then probably some that, maybe didn't work as well with regard to Worcester Regional Airport. A lot of folks thought that was the panacea for the system in Boston, and that the access to that airport just continues to be challenging. So I think Logan had tried to do some air service incentives for airlines that were serving Logan to also serve Worcester. Some of those have met with mediocre, if not mediocre success, or really haven't worked. So those are things that were learned as we went through that system. And then, there's other examples out there too. The Port Authority's been trying to do a lot with Stewart Airport to give the New York City system some relief. That has stumbled over the years. They just haven't been able to figure that out as well. So hopefully, those are a lot of different things and experiences. And there's more here, but certainly just wanted to give you some highlights of some things that maybe this team can bring to you in the conversations they've had. Is that helpful?
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a quick question. question. I don't know if it's relevant, but is it Peter is the attorney?
Sure.
Peter, are you licensed in the state of Washington?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I began my practice in Seattle in 1984.
Thank you.
So just continuing on, the management approach, just wanted to give an update on our contract status. So we're currently finalizing the master agreement with DOT. We hope to execute that here. I think we got most, if not everything in. It's just going to be close to finalizing that master agreement. It's set up to be like an on-call, so we can do multiple task orders under that based on the direction of the work group. And really, you know, part of us wanting to be here today, even though we're not under contract, is really start to listen, even though I've been coming to the meetings, right, just to understand the thought and the needs and ultimately the vision of the work group. I think that'll help get us going. We're you know, start developing those initial task orders. We imagine we're not going to be able to envision those all here between this and the next meeting. So there'll be some that we start. And you know, there'll be others in the future. The legislative budget timing, you might be familiar with this if Ann hasn't already shared, but there's some things, right? There's initial funding underway, but there's some estimating that needs to be done too, right? So this is the chicken or the egg, right? Trying to figure out exactly what you want to look at and study will help us figure out the costs for some of that. So we might need to, you know, make some assumptions on some of that with some of the initial funding, but then also work with you to get you what you need by the due date. So I understand there's something by the end of this year, but then it's really mid-year next year to try to have some updates on that. So, you know, imagining that we would have multiple task orders underway at some point, we presented a management approach of how we would work with you and even categorize some of the work. So this is just an initial thought at some of that, right? There's going to be some program administration. We were here yesterday with Christina and her team to understand the setup of the meetings and how some of that happens, as well as just the, you know, overall administration of the task orders. The education and past research, right? Understanding the baseline and getting everybody baseline. There's been some other studies and other things going on, but, you know, make sure the work group has, you know, what they need to understand everything that's been done in the past, either by, you know, the Puget Sound Regional Council, the CAWG, or the airports themselves, right? We don't want to repeat anything. So I think understanding and baselining some of that will be important. I think there'll be some new research and technical studies that you may want to look into as well. Communications and engagement, I think, is going to be important. What's the story the work group needs to tell, and how do we build that and message that out? You know, that may be part of just the annual report that's required, but we want to make sure we think through that, and that's where Stepherson will also help with their communications knowledge and messaging. And then legal and implementation. So there might be some things we want to do and come up with, or ideas you have as a work group. But, you know, what are the hurdles to get those done? How can they be implemented? Are there some legal things that would need to change, or is it just understanding the cost of those things as well? So that's kind of just some of the initial thought on, you know, how we would categorize as we get multiple things going on to kind of keep track of things. But we're certainly open to ideas on how we can move that forward as well. Within that, just, you know, there probably some protocol stuff that we need to work out, and I can work with the chair to figure out the, you know, exact methods. You know, who do we take direction from, right? And understanding that, right, is the chair and vice chair role for officially identifying that process for the task orders. Our contract is with Washington DOT, so as it comes from that aspect in the approval process, we just want to do that. Tasks, you know, as I mentioned, they can be specific, some open-ended for flexibility. You know, like, you know, go study this, right? Here's the scope and fee, it's clear. Here's this, you know, we don't really know what, but, you know, want you to come to meetings, have some open-ended conversation type stuff. But but in the end, all of those will ultimately have a scope fee, a schedule, and an expected deliverable, so you'll know what you can get. And then I mentioned with the first one, kind of the review and approval process. So we want to minimize that, right? Try not to have that take a lot of time. Certainly be able to jump in and act quickly as you identify things you need support with. So now maybe for more of that was kind of just the high level inputs. Wanted to, so Steve from Steer had put together some transport and aviation trends, 6 trends that he's seeing and our team sees that as we move through these studies, as we move through supporting you, takes a while, right? There can be months and years, and there's things and trends that change. In the next 6 months, things could be different, or there could be different policy that may impact some things that we are looking at for you. So I thought we'd start by this, and then we have some questions and things that we'll talk through. So Steve, if you're back on board, I'll flip here for you.
Great. Great. Thank you, Mark. It's interesting. Anytime you start a big and particularly a project that could be multi-years, it's important to think about what the trends are that you have in your industry, your challenges, and especially in this last year, the policy and regulatory environment that's been changing. And that environment offers, benefits and constraints for this project and every other one around the country. And so thinking about how we look at these changes and opportunities and constraints, I think, is pretty important. So there's a lot of them, but I've really tried to boil them down into 6. One you're very familiar with, and that is the airport funding, traditional sources like the Airport Improvement Program, passenger facility charges, and what we've had the last 3-4 years, which ending in fiscal year 2026, and that's COVID relief. Airports still face limited financial capacity, pressures obviously for airlines to be good partners and keep their user charges low. So thinking about that and what the future of federal grants and support for projects in Washington that could be applicable to this effort is important. A second is we have seen finally public-private partnerships with transportation infrastructure unlocked the last decade in the United States. We at Steer were the #1 global technical advisor on P3s. So we do quite a bit on traffic and revenue forecasting and work on these. We've worked at John F. Kennedy Airport and New Terminal 1, which, believe it or not, is a $9.5 billion terminal project. Peter Kirsch has worked at Payne Field, which is another example of alternative project delivery. So that could be part of the answer on this and other projects. Where you see some real changes is in the next 4 of these. Climate and sustainability, we were in the Paris Accords, we were out of the Paris Accords, we got back in the Paris Accords, and we recently now are out of the international framework to address climate challenges. And what we've actually seen in the United States is that many states, cities, regions, they've continued or doubled down in some cases on their efforts to support the International Civil Aviation Organization, which continues to have a 2050 net zero emissions goals for aviation. And we see this locally, even in Seattle, where the mayor has been, aggressive on climate and sustainability. Multimodal and intercity system planning is another one where this administration has pulled back a little bit. And, there's never been great connection between air rail projects in the United States as there are in airports in Paris and Amsterdam and Munich. And it's funny, I was thinking about this before our call, but I talked about this issue so many years ago with Sid Morrison, the representative from Washington, who later was the state DOT secretary. And we finally made, several years after he had passed, some changes to the law that allow a better treatment of rail connecting into airports. So that is something we'll look at for this, not just intercity rail connectivity, but also transit connectivity, which can also extend catchment areas and be part of the answer, potentially in Western Washington, Cascadia. Equity and engagement, this is where there's definitely been a pullback of federal programs and in fact some outright prohibitions on equity and engagement programs. The city of Atlanta, for example, has declined to take AIP grants because they did not like the new grant conditions that were imposed on them. So it's a bit of a different world with that. And we see airport authorities and other transportation providers making changes in that throughout the country. And then lastly, I would just say international uncertainties, U.S. tariffs and trade tensions, as well as some discussions about our Canadian friends north of the border, have put a lot of pressure on aviation, particularly on inbound Canadian and European travel, which in some cases is down 20 to 25%. And it's also caused issues with supply chains for air cargo and actually for materials that go in to build new terminals in the States and raising the costs on those. So keeping an eye on those tariffs and trade, that's both a demand question, how many people are going to come here, but it also is a cost question, how much of the materials that we put in the infrastructure to respond to that demand, how are those being affected? And so just keeping our hands on the pulse of all these developments, I think, is important, and it's something that we can share throughout the project with you. Mark?
Thank you, Steve. Dick.
On a point that you made reminded me of our 2025 annual report, which you probably see, maybe saw, but one concrete recommendation we made based on a presentation earlier this year to the Washington State Legislature was that the legislature do what it can to influence sound transit with respect to the siting of this Everett Link Extension terminal near the Painfield Passenger Terminal. They've got 3 locations under consideration, and only one of the 3 is even remotely within walking distance of the terminal. And we took the position that we need to prioritize that multimodal link that is currently in the planning stages to make sure that that is as seamless as possible. So everybody knows that the further the terminal is from rail, the fewer people will take rail, drives traffic, hurts climate, doesn't maximize the multi-billion-dollar investment in rail that we're building anyway.
Point taken. And I had seen that, but it's important. And that's the kind of stuff this group, I think, can do, right? Is help say that is a priority and should be a priority. So
it's similar to Evan's point. We know that high-speed rail in Cascadia is in the very early planning stages. Yes. And one of my concerns is that Sea-Tac be included like they are in Europe. You know, as Steve mentioned, I mean, you can go to Frankfurt and Amsterdam and these cities and go down the escalator and catch a high-speed rail train to anywhere in Europe. Why can't we do that here? So that's my message.
Sounds good.
Can I just echo on that a little bit? Sea-Tac absolutely has to be on the Cascadia line, and PDX and YVR.
Yep. No, that sounds good. Thank you. And thank you, Steve, for that. And like I said, it's just some trends, right? If some of you are probably aware of them, but certainly just wanted to put that in there for your thoughts this afternoon. As you know, when we were thinking as a team, our understanding of the work group role, obviously defined by legislation, is important. Certainly considering all the different modes that are going to come and things that are happening. And as I mentioned earlier, even the advanced air mobility, right? There's not a certified aircraft yet, but by the time we get done with this effort, supporting this work group, there might be, right? So there's things that are evolving there that we want to be cognizant of as well. Understand both there's short and long range considerations. So as we support you, there might be some immediate things to kind of dive into that might help inform something like the rail connection at Payne Field. But then there's also long-term aspects of that. Some other things on the economic and private market side, right? We don't drive all those decisions. A lot of the travel decisions in the companies and at least on the air side, airlines are privately held and make a lot of their own business decisions based on agreements they have with airports and other facilities. Transit and rail is a little different. It's probably more quasi-private, quasi-government type stuff as well. But that influences things in the marketplace and decisions that are being made. And then ultimately kind of where we fit in, right, that research to support infrastructure decisions or things that can help your messages back to the legislature as well. So kind of see it as kind of that full circle aspect as we support you. So really, this is my last slide, I think, before kind of the open discussion. And as we thought through some of a few of these were in our interview, and then I added a couple on the bottom. But as we ask some questions back to you, I would encourage you to think about these questions and perhaps what your answers might be to them as you talk through this afternoon. But then also think about where the work group goes ultimately. So, right, just jumping in, both individual, right, you have representation, your seat on the working group brings you representing a certain interest, but then collectively as a work group as well. What can we learn, right? Some of you have been in this region for a while, have been even maybe part of some of the past studies or other things going on. What are the lessons learned there that we want to extract and kind of keep in front of us as we move forward? Like a lot of things, the role of aviation in the Puget Sound economy, I think, is an important piece to consider. Jobs and economic impact that come from travel, whether that's air, any really transportation travel. But I think that's important to keep in mind as we move through. And then really looking to get to a common strategic vision for the work group. And I mentioned it when I started. What's that story the work group needs to tell the community and the legislature about how we can help improve the capacity of aviation and transportation in this region. That's what we have. I can leave those questions up for now, but I'm certainly open for discussion or anything that you want to talk about. Might not have answers, but I'll certainly take some good notes and we can go from there.
All right. Well, thank you. And yes, please leave those questions up. So I think that's a good starting point. Does anyone want to ask any questions or address the questions here?
One of the things, two items. Number one, I think in what we want to tell the people about what we're doing, we have to make sure that they don't think what we're doing is looking for another site specifically. As you found out in the last go around, that didn't go over really quite as well as they had planned. And so that's the one question people ask, well, what site are you looking at? We're not looking at a site right now. We're looking at how to better relieve some of the traffic at Sea-Tac. And as the legislator who wrote the bill talked on our last meeting, he's looking specifically, he said this, and I think I can almost quote him, that he's looking for something that can help relieve the problems at Sea-Tac that we can do within the next 5 years. He said, rail is fine. He said, rail will take longer probably to do than a new airport, but also that he said the legislature has another group looking at rail. Now we need to have our input to that, but I don't think that should be our driving force, especially since the person that wrote the bill said it shouldn't be. So those are my comments on it.
And that's great, thank you, because it's nice to know, what hasn't worked, and we certainly want to make sure that we message and, what we share and how we talk about the work that, your group is doing, is that we, kind of tee it off, that its capacity and looking at the overarching, wrapping our arms around it rather than, new site. So I think that's a really good point. So thanks for bringing that up.
Something that I just wanted to mention is, we talk about, we're trying to figure out how to meet the growth, right? The demand, which is coming, right? Based on historical data, right? It continues to grow. But I think rather than looking at it in terms of, hey, we got growth coming, how do we accommodate it? Why are we trying to accommodate it? And I think we have to remember that so that our regions stay competitive, right? We can have mobility and we can have connectivity. Right? Otherwise, what's going to happen is this region is going to fall behind very quickly. So it's all about the economic engine and creating good jobs for the region.
Yeah, I think so much of that just plays into, the messaging and how we approach the work. Because it isn't just, we're not looking for a specific site, right? We're looking at how do we meet the growth, how do we look at capacity and utilize all of the resources.
One of the things we need to do quite soon, I think, is have Sea-Tac tell us what they think is going to, what their problems are, where we might be able to do something to assist. If you read the paper the other day, you see that they made some good headlines. RF explained that the fact that the people are coming, we can't tell them not to come. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people understand. People say, you have to limit how many can come. You can't do that. In San Diego that Steve was talking about, one of the suggestions in that study that was done, I'll never forget, is they just wanted us that we could, if we would ban 737s, then they'd fly bigger airplanes and that would give us more capacity. And to try to explain. So I think the public needs to understand what we can and can't do. And sometimes we don't explain that well enough.
Go ahead, jump in.
Okay, thank you. I want to make a couple of comments. One is I am so delighted to have this team working with us. These are recognized industry professionals. The kind of background that they gave us on the projects that they've worked on isn't just them bragging. All of these companies do have nationwide recognition as experts in the airport industry. So I'm excited to have them working with us. Kind of echoing on what Oris was just saying, it's important to me that engagement is a critical part of this because no matter what recommendations this group ends up making, I feel like if I was, a member of a local city council or whatever, and I got communication from the governor's office or from the legislature saying you will do this, I would be a little bit offended. So at some point, I want to make sure and reach out to the local communities and give them an opportunity to kind of do some problem solving at the local level and say, hey, we want to be a part of this economic vitality or not. So I want this to be a bottom-up approach, not just top-down.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm really happy that, you are pointing that out and that you're all on board and in favor of that. I think, that's can often be something that's overlooked. It's just, we get a lot of smart people in the room and we just start talking down to people and saying, this is what you're doing. And I think, the local region, they want to, the local businesses and communities and orgs and councils, they want to be involved. They don't know how to get involved and they don't know what really, their options are. Not just to be involved, but do they actually get a say in, what this is going to look like or, what they can provide to us. And so I think, part of what we'll do is, we'll have we'll work through what can they do? I mean, what can this group do? And how do we move, this strategy forward? And then who do we need to feed into that strategy? I think it gives really much more credence and oomph really to the final product when we can say that we have, talked to all of these groups and here are the problems. Here's what they would like to see out of it. And now how do we take that info and move that forward into, actual projects?
Ben has his hand raised. Go ahead, Ben.
I'd just like to echo what Ann said. I'm really excited about the experience that we have of this group, and I think it can really help the committee make an informed, clear recommendation, or if not a recommendation, at least shed light on some of the big questions that we have. I do want to follow up on something Arif said, because I think the why behind what we do is super relevant. I would just add that one of the big questions that we should help eliminate is what happens if capacity is not met? And your experience at best practices and implications around the country would be really good, particularly with regards to airfares and the impact that might have on the community at large if we are not able to solve for the growth of demand with the current infrastructure that we have today at Sea-Tac and Painfield.
That's great. Thanks, Ben.
Well, I would just say, based on what Anna said and Arab and Horace, that we ought to include Federal Way and Berrien and the others, forgotten the third one that appeared in the Seattle Times yesterday. We'll already have a lawsuit going about this. So I think, and Arif responded nicely to that, I think. What he didn't say is you're probably going to lead to slot control, among other controls, if we don't meet the capacity, like Ben just mentioned.
Yeah, so I wanted to let everybody else, if anyone else had comments. I have a specific fact question raised by comments here, and then also some of your presentation. But Mr. Reardon,
sure, yeah, I'll jump in. Well, welcome aboard. Glad to have you on the team. I think it's important. I think that a lot of us around here on the committee, we've been meeting for a year, kind of getting a feel of how we work together, kind of getting, our sea legs under us, and welcome aboard. We need, your team. We need you. I think that we have some vacancies, and I think once we start spooling up the work that we're doing with you, those vacancies will generate some interest and be filled. I am too, like what Ben said, what happens, when will capacity, I go through that airport all the time, and that terminal is full. You walk up and down that aisle, you have to manage your way around people. So terminals full. Are we reaching capacity from a terminal perspective? Are we reaching a capacity from an approach and departure capacity? I kind of would like to know, I'd like to have a nice feel of when that capacity is going to be met. I also, that's operational stuff. I'd like some assistance, or I think we need some assistance as a team here, or as a committee. What is our goal? What's our flight plan? I know where we are right now. I don't know what our destination is. I know we want to solve the capacity issue, and I know we want to have these issues, but as a committee, what's our process to get from here to there? And I think we're all kind of looking for a little bit, at least I'm looking for a little bit more of that. And I think probably you are too. You were selected, but we know where we are, where are we going? This project is, it's kind of like a wildfire. Like from a political perspective, there's going to be issues. People have a problem with that. If you're somebody that thinks there's going to be a airport built in your backyard, it's another wildfire. All the elected officials. Most normal people, kind of would, run from wildfire. Slow Henry Ford, he captured the fire. He put it in an engine, put it in a horse to carry, and taught us how to drive, right? So we hope that you and this team can kind of focus on where we're going to go, how we're going to get there. That's all I have. Thank you.
I know that's great. I appreciate that. And yeah, I think it's that collective, right? There's a lot of smart people and minds from the region and representatives, and then combining that with the things that we know, right? And try to merge those two to get on a good path for the group.
So my observation leading to question. So one of my, I guess, common either strategic vision or is that while we recognize this is a long-term project, there's also, I think, a popular perception that the government at large can't do anything timely or effective, and we need to fight that. We need to we need to do our outreach, because there's some tension between the public demand for outreach and process and the public demand for the government to do things quickly, and they're almost in direct tension. And so we need to balance those twin impulses. There'll be some people saying we need more process. Sometimes that's a cover for we don't want anything to happen at all. And other people saying, well, we need to make sure everybody's opinions are taken into account, which is true to a point. My specific question, though, it's been brought up that there's capacity out there. There's a limited ability to demand that people take advantage of that capacity. So when you looked at San Diego and Boston and the regional planning and the sort of alternate airports like Providence and Manchester and the Tijuana cross-border connection and Palomar, San Diego, what's the role of marketing outreach and public outreach and kind of driving demand shift to those alternate airports? Because you're talking about a solution in the next 5 years. Bainfield has a plan and Sea-Tac is underway, but if we're talking about driving demand elsewhere out of Sea-Tac, Bainfield and to a much lesser degree Bellingham have commercial service now and need people to take it. So how did that work in San Diego and Boston?
Yeah, well, I'll speak to New England. If Steve should still be on, and when I'm done, he can chime in on San Diego. New England was interesting. We had a term during the project called competitive cooperation, right? Because none of those 11 commercial service airports, I think there was 11 different entities that operated them or agencies that operated them. So they're all different, right? But they were all realizing and understanding the need to support each other in a way that didn't really change their business model significantly, right? So, well, part of that, by doing that, by highlighting some of the things that were needed or some of the constraints at Logan at the time, was mainly on the air side. So that actually, I think, helped. There were some congressional briefings, but there were also briefings to airlines that were part of that as well. And I think that helped make some decisions about where they were going to put some service into, right? Not a direct control, but certainly said, hey, there is capacity in Providence, there is capacity in Manchester. And by the way, that capacity is going to change once the runway extension gets done. So it's that messaging about the even just getting back to the why of some of that, right? So they're not quick, but they're things that can happen. Throughout the course of that, though, there's things that change as well, right? There was a heavy regional jet use at Logan Airport at the time. And as airlines started upgauging some aircraft, that changed some things, right? You can drop more passengers into Logan with the same operation with a little bit of a bigger aircraft. That doesn't always work based on the markets that are being served. And, that's that private market and airlines making decisions based on what works and what they're seeing for the demand on their model. But there are other ways that can change some things in dynamics of capacity, right? There's capacity of airspace, capacity of the airfield, capacity of a terminal building, capacity of your land side. They're not always connected. They're kind of their own entities and own things at the same time. So understanding that can be very complex because you can move one piece of the chess the puzzle, right? And then it changes one thing, but then might cause you a challenge on something else. So there's a lot of dynamics there, but a lot of it was in just understanding the capacity and that those airports were experiencing at the time, and then what some of the other options were that could help do that. So, I don't know if that gets completely answering your question, but that was the essence of it. And then that provided a lot of the funding and prioritization of the funding I think that was when we were doing some earmarks back then, but even congressional earmarks to help get these projects funded quicker and fully funded quicker versus just relying on that. And now we're even seeing, you know, potential triple P type opportunities as well. So Steve, I think you might still be on, but do you have any more further insight in San Diego?
Well, I think the question's a great one because, as well as a couple of the comments about engagement, because I think the principal thing we have to do is tell the story. And you have to tell the story from the beginning, not the middle chapter. So, for example, if somebody brings up slots, slots can only be understood by the public if we baseline what future demand is against available capacity at all the airports in Washington, and obviously with a particular focus on Western Washington, and what is to come in terms of capacity to meet that demand. What is the cost of not meeting capacity? And we did that very well, I think, in San Diego. And the public was brought along a bit because we looked at all the county's airports. We looked at the alternatives to adding capacity. Mark, just like Boston, the thing that saved Seattle, San Diego the most was today there's about 155 passengers per operation in San Diego, which is well up from what it was. So what's happened all across the West Coast, including Seattle, the runways have become a lot more efficient, delivering more passengers per operation. And in effect, what that's done is bought some time. At the same time, as you've done that, that's required that terminal hold rooms, checkpoints, concessions, bathrooms, everything be expanded, recognizing that everybody's coming at the same time now through the same checkpoint, sitting in the same hold room, and that's required changes there as well. I think certainly in San Diego, the airlines were an absolutely critical component. They understood this. They shifted their operations to larger domestic narrow-body jets for the most part, and that was very helpful in terms of meeting that future demand. So the lesson learned to me for this initiative is to start with that baseline, right? Demand, capacity, where it's available, what's projected, how it can be met, what are the costs of not meeting unmet capacity from an economic standpoint. And that really helps with the storyboard for the public.
Thanks, Steve. I'll just add one thing too, back on New England. One of the themes besides competitive cooperation was helping New England be New England. So part of what the study did is looked at the industries in New England that had a propensity for travel, like healthcare, like education, and some of the businesses, if you will, that were using that. And we actually split travel into 4 categories. It was business travel. You live in Boston, you're going somewhere else for business, or you live somewhere else and you're coming to Boston for travel. In the leisure market, it was, I live in Boston, I'm going somewhere else for recreation, or I live somewhere else and I want to come to Boston. And really, you can break down most travel, if not all travel, into one of those 4 categories. And then understanding why they were traveling and the importance of having Boston available to them was a key aspect of a lot of what that study did and helped to inform a lot of the why it's important.
So I think just, something you brought up is, how do we look at, how do we get the public involved, right? There's market drivers for the public to get involved and, kind of definitely bottoms up, start steering things we can look at, whether it's cost, whether it's availability of flights. You mentioned, paying fields as, taking some of the capacity. So what are some of the things, and this group will still help suss those out. What are some of the things? Is it, a bunch of flights to Hawaii? I have 2 people are going to Hawaii in the next month. So is it, additional capacity and operational needs that are being met? What are the drivers? What would make people want to go to Painfield? Is it free parking? Is it, cylinder pass? Whatever it is it something that, we can start driving? And then this group can start looking at operationally of like, oh, well, this is, this makes this even better. And it starts to alleviate. So there's a lot of research But I think a lot of it comes from really understanding, we say stakeholders or people at the table, but it really comes from understanding, what the market drivers are for the public. To be willing to, at this point, they're so used to going to Sea-Tac to go out of their way to go to Everett. I mean, what's in it for me to go to Everett?
Yeah, I think it's important to also point out that, for those of us from this area, that there's a huge catchment area for Everett. So a lot of people won't necessarily be getting out of the way. It's just that they don't have the frequency, they don't have the routes right now, etc. There is significant, anything north of like Buffalo, for example, it will be a potential great area to go because it avoids traffic into SNA, right? So there is a significant population that will use it if they have access to it. I mean, if the routes are there. Sure.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you said. It's either, I mean, right now we either have the carrot method, the stick method, or I guess what I call the grease method, where we make it easier to get where you want to go. And that's, I mean, I think having you folks on board here, we can talk about those, and maybe there's another method that I haven't even thought of yet. But I feel like part of the reason we're on this board is, we are being somebody who's a port employee. I think probably this comes to us naturally, is that we have a state full of, they're not our constituents, but they're somebody's constituents, and they want it to work. I mean, we want it to work, and I think we need to, out of respect for them, I think that's what the, we're talking about the main, where we're trying to get to. I appreciate the way you said that, Charlie, is that how do we get there for their sake? Most of us here sit at these tables, we'll find a way to get there, and that's not a problem. But for everybody in the state to be able to get there, I think has got to be one of the core as to why we do this, or this is going to be another, I hate to say this, but another throwaway committee. I don't want to be that guy. So appreciate your help on that.
No, we're going to try our best, right?
Nice to meet you all. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to working with you all. I did have a question on the equity piece, sort of pulling back on some of it. Washington State, and this committee in particular, has worked some on the HEAL Act. I know the Environmental Justice Committee has worked a lot at the WashDOT is a part of. So I really want to make sure that not only Sea-Tac, but that we're looking at the full state. So that's our regional airports that are in, a lot of times in overburdened communities or smaller rural communities, that we're looking at that as the full spectrum. Workforce development is something as well. So when we're doing engagement, it's not just the cities, it's also the people that live within those cities, because a lot of the times that's the majority of the people that work at your airports. So I'd appreciate that.
Great.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's been, as a public outreach person, it's been some new rules have been thrown out, and so navigating those. I'm glad that that's a focus of this group, and that it's elemental to success, and it really is. I mean, right? We all know that that's once you get everybody at least understanding the same reality, and that this is benefiting everybody. It's an economic engine. All of these good things that this group is going to be proposing and looking at. We can't leave people behind. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Good, yeah.
Another, you can't shut me up.
No, I want you to go. You're being so polite, raising your hand over there. I'm like, go ahead, go.
An important element to me, and it's in the legislation, but I think it's also a part of trying to solve this problem, is taking a multimodal approach. And that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, because DOTs from US DOT all the way on down aren't accustomed to doing true multimodal planning. That multimodal planning usually means transit and rail and highways. But including aviation, I think that's going to be an important part. And just now there was a little bit of a discussion about people using Payne Field and the demand at Payne Field. But there's a lot of people in the South Sound area that drive to PDX. And that's not because of Sea-Tac, it's because of I-5. And so that's part of, I think, the whole universe of what we need to understand and figure out, maybe we can, deal with the aviation demand and deal with highway congestion at the same time. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, that's a great point.
For sure.
Right. One of the tensions in the idea of, we should solve our problems by building a, greenfield airport in the middle of nowhere. This is back to your point that, the people who work, it tends to drive car dependent suburban sprawl and, creates long commutes for relatively low wage workers who work at airports. And that's just two of the many drawbacks of that solution. Similarly, I keep, it pops up online. I saw it pop up again yesterday. Rich, why don't we have a big new international airport in Moses Lake? And,
A lot of reasons.
there are a lot of reasons why that's not that solution keeps getting brought up and then keeps not moving forward because,
Yeah, we definitely have our part to play, but that's just not that hard.
Yeah. I forgot what I was going to say about.
Can I jump in on that just for a second? It's like, it's whatever the gentleman said about telling the story. That's part of it. I mean, all right, yeah, Moses Lake's got the infrastructure from a concrete and runway and taxiway system, but we don't have a population. And to get there, I have to drive over the mountains. Okay, that's okay in the summer, but in the winter, I don't want to do it. I mean, I'm old. I don't want to do that. But and then we talk about I-5. Will I go to Portland or will I go to Sea-Tac? Well, if I can save $20 on a ticket out of Portland, I'm going to take my wife and my 3 kids to Portland, and we're going to go out of Portland. So there's the economic aspect of that as well. There's a lot of issues to bring up, but just to focus on your story, it's a very hard sell for me to turn high desert airport in the state of Washington into something to take over the capacity. Or I mean, it's on this side of Cascades, in my opinion.
I remember what I was going to say about rail in the shorter term than the Cascadia Ultra High Speed Rail that's out there, which is the state's already Amtrak Cascades is primarily washed out funded. They're adding trips between Seattle and Portland. That obviously picks up a certain amount of direct Seattle-Portland travel. But one thing that I think is really almost completely unaddressed ability of Amtrak Cascades is to take a passenger who's in Olympia and get them to Portland Airport. Now, transit nerds like myself might, on their own, take Amtrak to Portland Max and out to the airport, do that kind of thing. But actually making that easier, seamless, marketing it to people as a reasonable option.
Yes.
Or similarly, Cascades north to the Tukwila station, which right now you would have to get an Uber or Lyft on your own to get from Tukwila to Sea-Tac, which is only about 4 miles.
But it's one more step.
It's one more step
or hurdle.
But it is something that can be implemented soon at a relatively low cost,
yep,
as opposed to the multi-billion-dollar, decades-long project to build a high-speed rail line from Vancouver to Portland.
Great first step as far as a bigger plan.
Yeah, and you're seeing some creativity. I know American Airlines out on the East Coast, out of Philadelphia, is doing some things with the bus. I'm not sure. I don't have a lot of detail. I'm not really involved in it. But it's actually part of their ticketing system, and you're and the whole security process of flying through air travel, right? So depending on where you are, right, there are some creative solutions that are happening that it might look different. Obviously would look different here, but those are things that might be able to happen, right, as we further the conversations and look into some things a little bit different.
For those not familiar with that, you're talking about where passengers can purchase a ticket, but they go through security from a a regional airport somewhere, and then a secure bus takes them straight to the aircraft.
Correct. Yeah. Like Allentown, you can get on a bus, Atlantic City, and then they take you to the secure side of Philadelphia Airport and can continue the journey. Can't speak to the efficacy of the customer experience when it comes to that kind of stuff and that process, but it is, some things and solutions that are taking those operations off the airfield.
Los Angeles for years has had their own bus system that the airport runs from out in the valley to bring people to the terminal, and it's funded and run by the airport, and it has worked well. I mean, it's been there for 35, 40 years. They do make a couple of mistakes, kind of dealing with, they want a new airport out in the high desert, international airport. They bought 25,000 acres at Palmdale, and now they grow waiuli and pistachios on that.
And Ontario's going.
And Ontario's going great. The minute they took it away from LA, which LA was just using that as a dumping ground for people that they didn't want to have work in LA. And it was a real problem as it progressed. It's probably the fastest growing airport on the West Coast right now.
You're talking about Ontario International in East, and not the pistachio farm.
Yeah.
The bus, and actually might be an excellent question for Ben, who's online, who's our Alaska Airlines representative, is that, whether they've considered the remote bus terminal in a place like Olympia, and then, where they can take them, get on a bus, clear security, drive up I-5, go through the gate and be inside security at Sea-Tac.
And I'm not saying the bus is the exact solution, but if that's something with rail, right? Maybe getting the rail to have a connected ticket. There's things that can be explored there as well. So, Steve, were you going to chime in? I saw you come on the camera.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't disagree with anything that's been said so far. I would hope that in addition to these things like equity and multimodality, we would also consider energy, generation, remote on-site transmission, implications of various types of energy. It's a current topic. Also, travel demand management. The WashDOT oversees a similar committee that Kerry Wohler chairs that is involved with addressing the demand side of the equation, and then also possibly any lessons that we can learn in the preparations that are being made for the World Cup.
Great, thank you.
I would just add, the multimodal option, especially when it comes to busing, is something I would ask the consulting group to consider. It's something that I'm very familiar with. It's an interesting concept, something that we have looked at. We have not gone down that path yet at Alaska, but that product, which is available to folks in the Northeast and in the Dallas area, if I recall correctly, through Landline, is a really interesting one that would relieve some capacity when it comes to security checkpoints, lobby, parking at places like Sea-Tac or even Painfield.
Saw Maria Badiola's got her hand up, sort of our, I guess must have joined. Maria, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I really appreciate listening to and catching up on this conversation. It would be fantastic too if the consultant will, in addition to equity and multimodality and management and so forth, really include health, environment, and climate impacts. As just for an information point, the 2025 King County Strategic Climate Action Plan has identified aviation greenhouse gas emissions at 16% of all greenhouse gas emissions in King County. Sea-Tac is part of that data set. They're at 13% of all greenhouse gases. So we need our consultant to also have this larger view so it aligns with other initiatives at the state level for health. Thank you, sir.
And in the block after lunch, the legislative text that we've been given specifically calls out like supply of sustainable aviation fuels to any, airport that is considered as kind of part of this project for expansion or for construction. And then we've already talked about advanced air mobility, which is, electric planes.
Chair, I also wanted to chime in with regards to the sustainable aviation fuel. The King County 2025 Strategic Climate Action Plan in the accounting section identified that the accounting for greenhouse gas for SAF would be for full cycle. So just wanted to, put that on the table so we're aligning with local jurisdictions also. Thank
Maria,
you.
what you mean by that? Full cycle meaning including production of the fuel and then burning
Production,
of it?
transportation, distribution, the full life cycle, because it's all contributes to the greenhouse gases.
Yeah,
It's under a climate plan.
If it's farther away from where it's produced, you're kind of depleting the benefits of that by just transporting it to where it needs to go, right? So those aspects of it. Understand your point.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else have? I have another specific question I can ask. I talk a lot. My wife tells me to. So in San Diego, were you able, how successful has it been to drive with marketing, demand management to the cross border? How many people who would otherwise have flown out of San Diego Airport are now taking cross border connection or flying out of Palomar or somewhere else, Ontario?
I can answer that. I just had the meeting down there 2 weeks ago, and that was part of the presentation. I can't remember exactly, but there's thousands of people are now doing it. I mean, it really has been a very, Steve may know the actual number, but it has been very beneficial. And as I said, it was one of the things that Steve was mentioning that we looked at to support that. And certainly the airport, we just had our advisory committee meeting, and it's still very high on the list of being supported by the airport. The other one that came out at that meeting was some service north of San Diego by Palomar Airport. It's had jumps and starts of some commercial service, but very little that's worked. I mean, there's some there now, but compared with what's going into Mexico, I would say there's thousands of people going through the Mexico walk. Because you can go drive, park in a parking lot in the U.S., walk across the bridge, and you're on the airplane.
Yeah, I mean, the beautiful thing in San Diego and the Tijuana connection was it was really additive. Volaris, who's the Mexican carrier that then flies to lots of destinations in Central and Latin America, really didn't need the airport itself to market, but they could market to their customers that they had a new convenient alternative. And that's the thing. When you design seamless integrated infrastructure, you build it and they will come. If you build connections that don't seamlessly connect, that are a pain, that requires a transportation nerd to put together 2 or 3 different schedules in order to take it, you're going to have less than 1% of people who take that service. So I think the key thing is understanding what you're trying to do. I think the points earlier made about Everett and the Everett line in transit are well taken. And if you've ever taken the TriMet to Portland Airport and how close it goes to the terminal, you understand the value of convenience and seamlessness. So, Oris, I'll track down the exact numbers, but in a way, it's more about how many people from San Diego get on Volaris than it would be about how many people from San Diego were diverted, because they don't even offer air services of the type that they do from Tijuana. So it's a good question.
And they're very happy that they don't have to offer that.
Yeah.
Because the only international service that they have out of there right now is basically Alaska Airlines to the resort places in Mexico. And if they would have to add Volaris, it would have to increase the size of their international facilities. they'd have to have more capacity as far as gates. Now they have the new terminal, but it's pretty much all taken up by Southwest of the new terminal.
So is Alaska the only carrier operating out of Tijuana, U.S. carrier operating out of Tijuana?
No, Alaska doesn't operate out of Tijuana.
Okay, are there any U.S. carriers operating?
I don't believe so.
So I couldn't fly from Tijuana to Seattle, for example.
No, but you could fly from San Diego to Seattle. And the Tijuana is only about 10 miles difference.
So it's basically, there's very, very limited San Diego, Mexico service, except the major hub airports and the resorts.
Resorts, yeah.
And Tijuana, for all the Volaris flies to cities throughout Mexico from Tijuana. Hard to analogize that to our situation here. But yeah.
I think what they're kind of showing you is that you can park somewhere and easily get to alternate airport besides the San Diego. Actually, that's the question I wanted to ask. Is like, I'm not familiar with that, so I heard you say I could park on the U.S. side.
Yes.
I get on, walk across the bridge, and then what happens?
You buy your ticket. Your checkpoint on the U.S. side. Buy your ticket. You walk across. You're in the terminal, you get on an airport.
So, the airport's right across the American Bridge, right across the bridge.
bridge.
Okay, all right, and then you're in the airport, the terminal.
You're in the terminal.
How about that? Okay.
But if I understand correctly, none of those flights go to the U.S.
No, they just go to Mexico and Central America.
But I think what Aris is saying, it saves the San Diego area having to invest in international facilities. You go into Mexico and it is domestic service in Mexico and then international to other parts of South America. But the US side saves having to invest in the international side.
Yeah,
because you can just walk across the bridge.
It would be like if Seattle didn't have flights to Canada because Vancouver Airport was on the border and you could drive and then walk and then fly from Vancouver. So it's, what I'm saying, it wasn't a neat analogy, is because of the geography of it and the fact that Tijuana Airport has always been physically on the border that allowed the cross-border project to work well and meet that demand.
And these won't always be perfect fits, right?
Yeah.
But they're just examples of solutions and others that might spur a way to kind of do something here that might fit, right? Or a combination of a couple of different options.
Obviously, it's been, I think that opened 10 or 15 years ago. You've had all that time to build up knowledge in both Mexico and San Diego that, hey, if you're going to the San Diego area, this is how you do it.
There's marketing in it for sure, right? Yeah, it's not just infrastructure.
It is a lesson, though, I would just say, too, that San Diego was foresightful enough to realize, as Oris indicated, that they could maximize, that they would rather have capacity for other purposes than serving all that traffic potentially on Volaris. A lot of airports would have viewed each other as a competitor and said, San Diego County, don't play ball on this. Don't put in the cross-border connection. We want to have the monopoly on flights there. And so I think it's an important lesson, because in the future, thinking about capacity in the state of Washington, it might be that the airports decide, as capacity is limited, what type of capacity they want to serve. Do you want to serve 12 frequencies a day to a relatively short-haul market that could potentially be served by rail? Or do you want to reserve your capacity for long-haul and international and markets that you really want access to? So thinking about it strategically like that, I think, is pretty important.
And Steve, thanks for bringing that up. And I mentioned before that I want to make sure and give communities the choice of what kind of service they want. So but we've got to include airlines in in that conversation too. Ben, Alaska has recently said that Sea-Tac is their international hub now, and they're doing a lot of growth out of that. So if that's the choice, if that's the way Sea-Tac's going to be used, then maybe it makes sense to look at other airports for the domestic service.
Yeah, and Steve, I think, the approach we've taken here in Western Washington is a system approach, right? So we're having great discussions with our peers, right, our other airports, and we've taken the approach, and I think the FIFA World Cup was a great example of that in terms of how do we work together as a system to address a challenge, right? So hosting a big event, the World Cup in the city, can be challenging, and then we're working as a system to try and accommodate the flights and so on. So, and that doesn't need to stop at that, right? It can be in terms of addressing the capacity issue for the region. Multimodal, we got to look at that too. It's not just all aviation, but the airports themselves are committed to working together as opposed to being competitive individual assets.
I would agree with that, and I think Washington has been somewhat unique in that way, with the airports all working together towards the common good. Steve, I do think, though, just to your point, there's probably an education process that's going to be required here. That ultimately the airlines are the ones that determine which cities and the number of flights they choose to serve. We can't create domestic and international segmentation. It just doesn't work that way. I think how we create a complete and operationally efficient system that might allow that is really the fundamental question, not how we force things in that frankly just can't be forced for lots of reasons.
No, great, Benjamin. I think the only point I would make is if you had one more flight available with Alaska and you had a new international market that was a potential connection for you all, you would want that to some extent to be made based on, criteria that would return the most value to your shareholders, but also, serve the community well. So the main thing is trying not to allow the airports to be capacity constrained in the future, because otherwise then a system could be put on you where the Washington, D.C. is deciding if flights can come in and what type of flights can come in. And I don't think Seattleans want that. I don't think Alaskan Airlines wants that.
We agree. I think the important consideration here are these international flights, which are obviously the largest from a capacity perspective, are part of a greater system. Our international routes, and Delta's international routes as well, are somewhere around, sometimes at best, 50% local traffic. So they do rely on robust domestic connectivity to be able to facilitate those. And so it really works as part of the system. And then the other thing that I would add is, as we think about, because I agree with you, the trend over time is going to be upgauging to larger aircraft from, Embraer 175s to 737s and beyond. But there is a net positive impact to the community when you have some of these smaller markets that are served at relatively low frequencies. We just announced, for example, Tulsa, Oklahoma, which will be served daily on an E175. That's a market that has no nonstop service today. And so those types of things, in addition to the Londons and Tokyos of the world, do add a tremendous amount of value to the community and the businesses and the traveling public at large. So we don't want to lose sight of the importance of that.
Maria, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, please. In listening to the conversation, the question that comes up for me is this, for lack of a better term, needs demand assessment with the airlines going to be part of the consultant's work? Because it's a process in itself, other than us sharing individual knowledge and systems knowledge.
Yeah, it can be, right? That's something that the work group needs to define.
Yeah, it seems really important. I support it. Thank you.
I think Anne's been trying to say something for
Well,
a minute.
and this is just really nerdy aviation, but it kind of fits into what we've just been talking about. I Googled U.S. air carrier service out of Tijuana, and there is one route, and it's American Eagle direct from Tijuana to Phoenix. So obviously there's a market that was, worth it for American Eagle, which is a regional carrier, to operate. So, there could be those, one-offs.
Well, we need to go to Tijuana for some reason and don't want to connect through Guadalajara and Valaris.
Yeah.
You'll have to figure out our field of dreams and where we build it and all of those things.
Well, Well, it's 10 minutes to June. I'm going to look at Christina for lunch.
It is.
Lunch is here. Okay. Well, does anyone else have anything we want to add now? We've got a whole other hour of discussion for after looking at the panel. Okay. All right. Well, I think it makes sense to recess for now, and then we'll pick back up at 1 o'clock with it's more or less continuing its discussion, but I kind of went through point by point through the statutory language and the elements that the legislature's expressly asked us to look at, and then talk about with you all, and then start thinking about the timing of some of this over the course of the next year, staging, and in light of our kind of typical meeting schedule and things like that.
Yeah, and I would encourage you just before lunch, and as we think through lunch and that conversation, right? Maybe think about how we prepare a plan for the year, so that, you know, because there's a lot of conversation, a lot of things you want to do, right? We got to figure out the buckets and priorities of that will maybe build on itself, ultimately get the results by the end of the year.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a break.
Recording stopped.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. We're calling things back to order here at a couple minutes after 1. So we had that good discussion, I think, leading into our lunch break. And I promised that we'd start off at 1 o'clock. I broke down the statutory language from ESSB 5161 into kind of pieces that the legislature has asked us to look at, and there are a lot of them. So I thought I might try to kind of chunk these up, and then we can have a discussion about a chunk, and then a discussion about the next chunk, and then kind of try to. Then where I think our goal is to give some guidance to our consultants on our work plan for the next year, what we need to prioritize, what we think we should prioritize, and what we have been asked to prioritize by the legislature, and then how to go about that. So we have on the agenda as published, we had a list that Ann compiled and I tweaked as well, of kind of new, broken down to basically new research needs that are out there. And then the statutory language gives us quite a bit else that I did not repeat in the agenda. So here's what the legislature is asking for. They want us to look at the long-term commercial aviation needs, the specific needs of Western Washington, taking into account capacity in adjacent states and provinces. Aviation facility needs while considering alternatives to additional airport capacity. Investing, and this is actually a bit to Boris's point from earlier. It does expressly say investigating the expansion of existing aviation facilities and possible siting locations for new greenfield aviation facilities, with the expected outcome to be a report that compares the strengths and weaknesses of each site considered. Shall consider both new sites and those previously identified. And then asks us to consider impacts and a very, very long list of impacts. Perform outreach, give us a specific list of groups to be, at a minimum, reached out to. And then I'm going to stop there because there's actually quite a bit more. So I mean, I gave this some thought, and it seems to me that the idea of a literature review is kind of the first step we need to tackle, because you know, kind of recalling that the commission, the prior commission, looked at everywhere. You go back far enough in their work. They looked at a map of Western Washington and drew 6-mile circles on the map, essentially everywhere that was flat enough that could potentially be a location for an airport, purely as a matter of geography, and then started crossing those off. The land hasn't changed. That work was done already. And it struck me that from that perspective, we could start where the CAC left off and essentially bring everybody as a member of this group up to the same level of understanding of what was done there. And then we start factoring in, then we start building in the other factors, airspace, weaknesses. They identified sites such as community sentiment, ideas of high-speed rail connections to Everett and Vancouver and Portland. We start building in these other factors, but really beginning with a review of the work that's already out there. So that was a lot.
Just a comment. I had some information that I didn't have this morning. You asked about Tijuana. 12.5 million people fly out of that airport every year. 4 million of them use the cross border.
Wow. So that's 4 million a year. So that's 4 times current passengers through Everett taking cross-border to Tijuana. So if we think about that as essentially a second major airport for U.S. travelers out of
San Diego.
Oh.
Yeah. And just think about that. If they had Valeris there, how many airplanes it would take to have that 4 million? And remember, that's a 1 runway airport that's got a curfew. So everything they can move out of there is worthwhile anyway.
Yeah.
That's straight from San Diego ops.
Yeah. Wow. Well, if y'all are thinking about that, I could go through the rest of the things the legislature's asked us to look at.
Looks like Maria has her hand up.
Oh, okay, Maria.
Hi, Chair, please include in this discussion Representative Vai's legislation that asks us to identify geographic areas that are, I can't remember the word, if it's environmental impacted, and because we need to consider that with as much weight as the instructions we're receiving. Thank you, sir.
Yes, that you're right, and that's actually the second block. The second list of factors, or the rest of the very long list of factors, includes that other section in the statute that meaningful community engagement with overburdened and vulnerable populations with a focus on environmental justice and impact of aviation, and working to understand what studies currently exist on state transportation needs and capacities, identifying any gaps of information. Right. So you're right.
I'll just start off here with my burning concern as the WashDOT liaison is, Mark talked about this a little bit when he was doing their introduction, that we have budget to kind of get them started, but we're going to have to add to the budget, and that requires a request from the legislature for budget. And and they're expecting, they keep asking me, how much more money do you need? And my answer right now is, I don't know. But the time to ask is gonna be next summer. So about 6 months from here. So it's important to me that we're focused on coming up with a work plan so that we can develop a budget by June. Within 6 months. So rather than focusing on trying to answer questions, I really need us to focus on what is it we need to do? And let's not do that yet. Let's just figure out what we need to do so we can know how much that's going to cost us and ask. And then, this might be a surprise to everybody, but we won't necessarily get what we ask for from the legislature. So based on however that comes out, then we might have to change our kind of scope of work.
Right. Right. I mean, the annual reports are due December 1st of each year. We have a couple of, there were a couple of asks made in this bill that we were asked to try to get in our 2025 report. They're not in our 2025 report because we didn't get to them. But identifying unsuitable geographies due to either environmental impacts or impacts to overburdened communities is one of those, and also areas with no further review due to military conflicts. We have kind of a standing, well, I have an email thread with a representative from, I think he's actually a Navy officer, but they very much want to come talk with us about the military airspace and other military aviation uses that would affect civilian aviation in Western Washington. And so that may be a contact, Mark, that I may need to pass to you as far as getting information from them and perhaps bringing it to meet with us sooner rather than later, so that we can include that piece in our next annual report. There'll be the 26th annual report that's due December 1st, but actually needs to be to WashDOT no later than, is it around mid-October for review through channels and transmission to the legislature on or before December 1st. So.
Was that Navy, did you say?
I recall she in Navy.
You remember there was an Air Force officer, last meeting, or the one before, who says, you know, there's a way to do this, and we need to tell the Department of Defense exactly what it is we want to do. And then they'll be prepared to answer. I mean, we want to build a second runway at McCord or something like that. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I think they're looking for.
To say no to.
Yeah, they've maybe already said no to this, which is maybe something that we need to figure out, because I wasn't on the prior commission, so I don't know exactly what we've been told by DOD, or what, for that matter, what we ask. So I don't know, is that on our list of stuff to review? Because that doesn't help Ann's problem at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to add some clarity to that. It was a lieutenant colonel from the Air Force calling from DC, and basically what she stated, that in preview of this process, from this initial iteration through now, but there was no formalized request made, hence no activity on their end. But she did want to point out that there is a formalized process that would have to take place for this conversation to go any further.
Okay.
With DOD, from her perspective, Lieutenant Colonel of Air Force.
Okay. So that's a different person than the community and planning and liaison officer for the Northwest Training Range Complex, who's a Navy person who's been emailing.
And it was a call-in.
Okay.
So the Lieutenant Colonel from the Air Force, it was a call-in from DC.
Okay.
But
or
that
I say call-in, she was on the meeting.
But then that sounds like an agenda topic to have that conversation with the DOD.
Yeah.
And because if that results in us saying, okay, we're not going to talk about JBLM at all, that's off the table.
Yeah.
Then that's a piece of work done. We can move forward.
Right. And it can go in the annual report, and yeah.
I'd also like to bring up that we're talking about a specific item within the broad context of the work that we're going to do. We haven't even said whether we want to look at any of that. We haven't even identified we want to look at that. We haven't even got to the point that we need to go talk to them whether we want to do that. So I want to leave all that on the table. Even somebody that said take Joint Lewis McCord off the table. I'm a firm believer that politicians trump the bureaucrats. So if we find out that Lewis McCord is something we seriously want to look at, our representatives and our senators from Washington, D.C. may suddenly be on our side, and they trump the bureaucrats. So I think as a big picture for the state of Washington, the citizens of Seattle, we need to look at everything with an open eye, not saying we want to do it, but let's have a look and weigh it once we understand what it is.
Right. And, but the point is that this is a conversation to have sooner rather than later because the legislature asked us to have it sooner rather than later.
But when does the sooner or later fit into scope of work of these?
Right.
Yeah, that's right. Chair, if I can just add, I mean,
Yeah.
I think lucky to have the consultants coming on board soon, right? The contract signed up. We need to figure out what is it that we're trying to work on first, right? Rather than jump into let's go and ask so and so if they can be our solution, etc. What is it that we're trying to address? How much will it cost to get us those answers so that we can look at those answers and see, okay, there's the need, whatever, and then how do we apply it to get to a solution, right? I think right now we jump into, this is it. Maybe we should go directly to so and so. I know there's a request because it was raised by this group. I think it got to a point where they kind of said, okay, well, it formally submit a process to talk to the DOD, etc. But it's almost like, I think, putting the cart before the horses. We need to identify what is it that, what is the need for us in the region, right? What is it that we're trying to solve?
Right.
And then try and look at the specifics of how to get
I think before we can make any of these decisions, number one, we need to find out, since we're talking about Seattle and the west side right now, and just say, let's talk about that. What is the capacity of Seattle as Sea-Tac? We don't know. What are the other possibilities? I think that's what we need to start somewhere. We have to find out what it is, the numbers we're looking at. Here's Seattle. This is what they can do, how long it will do. Now, what are the other opportunities that we can look for other things, whether it's bus service or another airport? And that ought to be our starting point. Because if we don't start somewhere, if we keep talking about this and this and this and this, we'll never get anything done. Right. So what do we need first? I think first we need to know what we're working with. What are the possibilities? What is the restrictions on Sea-Tac? We need to hear from Sea-Tac what their plan is. Why they have a $6 billion plan that they don't have money for, and will they ever build it? You know, those are things that are got to be immediate on us making decisions on what we look at before we start looking at all the other kind of things that are listed in the resolution that they passed.
So that's the literature review piece of this. So,
a lot of those particular questions will be answered through what we've submitted as a sustainable airport master plan. It gives you what a capacity, what we believe is, right? And then at that point, we need to find additional capacity somewhere else to meet the demand. And that was already taken into account as part of the airport master plan in terms of the current airspace and the analysis that was done by other entities that said we need, I can't remember, I'm going to be careful about exactly, but 40 million extra capacity somewhere by 2040, that was before COVID. That was after the SCA is fully grown out.
We haven't seen any of that. This committee has not seen that.
Right.
Yeah. And that's why I say you need to review the literature on that, which is all out there. So
I think, talking with Steve too, right? That's our Steve on the team, right? That's one of the first things. Let's do that baseline literature review, get that all in front of you in a digestible manner, right? We gotta not throw 1,000 pages at you, right? It's gotta be succinct, and that's the work that I think depending on the timing of when we can ultimately get working, I think we can get that done maybe before the February meeting. Yeah. At least from the main components. It might not be everything and anything that's out there, but from the priority pieces of information that this group could identify, we could certainly do that.
So Maria, raise your hand online. Maria?
Yeah, I think where my brain goes to is in understanding, and I brought this up before, what the arc of the schedule is going to be. And I'm supporting Anne in terms of us being able to say, starting from the end with a report to the legislature, how many months do we have to put together that report? How many months of consideration and community engagement do we have in developing our recommendations, backing it up? How many months for analysis? How many months for data gathering? And I think that frame will help us really be focused on what are the critical questions that we're asking to be reviewed through data gathering and analysis and recommendation. So if I can just hear what that frame is, then I think, and again, this is also for my own protection, I tend to fall into data rabbit holes myself. That might give us a sense of what's all the preparatory work that needs to be done so that it times with our meetings, and that we're using our time to be really focused on what the intent of that within the larger process. So I don't know if it's you, Chair, or if it's Anne who could give us that big picture, but that would really help us all out.
Well, that's when I led off our discussion here. The legislature asked is text of Section 213 of ESSB 5161 is a very long set of criteria for us to look at. That's going to take more than a year. But two elements that they've called out for us to look at and try to come to some conclusions on first were areas with no further review due to military conflicts and unsuitable geographies due to either environmental impacts or impacts to overburdened communities. So out of that very long list, those two subjects were called out for priority. And so when we're talking about setting up a timeline of where to gather data first and then address those two topics, I mean, at least as I think about it here, the literature review of what's been done to this point, I mean, from the 1992 study forward, at least, to then get that in place so that then we can address these two priority topics first, understanding that some of this is going to kind of have to happen a bit in parallel. So we know we're going to be talking about those priority topics in the report that's got to have at least a draft by October of 26. Then if there needs to be a discussion with the DoD, then that probably has to be initiated sooner rather than later so that then they can have that discussion with us middle of 26 to be able to put that in our 26 report. So
I'm forcing the question so that exactly what you're saying, we can just have a very clear chunking of the work. I'm making this up. By March, I hear you, we may need to do those two things and get that done. And then what's the next set of by whens? Because part of what I want to be able to hear is to say, okay, then where are the right junctures to engage community?
Mr. Chairman, I think what Eric said earlier. We got a cart and we got a horse. Okay. We need to tell this team what we want to have done.
Right.
They need to come up with dollar value, and then they got to tell us, can they do it within the time frame that she would like an answer to? Okay, so right now, as far as I can tell, we haven't actually exactly said what we want to do, and they don't exactly know what we want to do. And until we ask them, they're not going to tell us it's going to cost X, Y, or Z. And then after that's agreed to, then they can begin. Right. So we can't really answer her question until we tell them where we want them to go. And they agree.
Yeah, and I just want to interject that I've been in the situations where I've hired consultants, and we need to cue them. This is by when we're going to need this. And then it's up to them to be able to say, yeah, I can make it or I can't, and then we can do adjustments. But the burden is on us to be able to say, this is how we want this whole thing to function. And these are the phases we want to move through. So I think we can make this decision. It's not perfect, but it's a good start. And then that dialogue can be a little bit easier with a consultant.
So let me try and winnow this down a little bit, because what I've got is if we continue to meet every other month, so we've got to have a budget request by June. So that's 3 more meetings, February, April, and June. So I just heard Mark say, which is generous, so I hope he doesn't back down on it. But Mark says he thinks his team can be ready to brief us all at the February meeting on literature review. So everything that's already out there that we know. So at the February meeting, we'll have all of that. And then when we know everything that's already out there, then we can say, okay, here's gaps. So here's then Mark and your team a list of more research that we want done. And that might include talking to DOD and talking to airlines and who knows, whatever our information gaps are. So then maybe we start to hear those at the April meeting. Or maybe not. Maybe we just know, okay, that's the research. We've got a budget for that. But there's another step we have to get to also put together the budget. So now we've got 2 more meetings to plan out.
Hey, Ann.
Yeah.
Ann, this is Steve.
Steve.
Steve Bambeek, sorry. What I would suggest is that in thinking about the literature review, we think about the strategic baseline for this assignment, and we don't think of everything in all the statutory charges that the legislature gave us on the literature review, because that will soak up a lot of time and budget immediately. So what I think we mentioned a little bit before lunch was, what is the demand profile going forward? How much capacity is out there to meet it? What projects then are going to deliver capacity within the time frame of this project? And then after that, probably in April, there's a sort of, where are the limitations, right? And the limitations on that include regional airspace concerns. They include sites that have been sort of ruled out for being inappropriate for future demand, right? And we might actually find other sites that say we can accommodate more demand, even demand that we don't already have planned and on the books. That would give us a sense of the big picture and begin to tell the story. I think some of these other issues are important, but they can follow on, like AAM, small community air service. That's kind of a public obligation kind of thought. You know, how does Friday Harbor have service? And we want to make sure that that works going forward. And then there's some things that are solutions, right? Multimodal and everything. But we should, by February, begin to have a baseline. By April, have the limitations for future capacity and capacity that could be available. And then we can get into those individual topics, many of which are either to manage when you don't have enough capacity, or to find smaller solutions that can bleed off a little capacity and contribute to the solution. And that would give us then sort of a February and April and a June, almost like a first round of all the issues, but with the story about why this is important, you know, statewide, the economic benefits it has, et cetera.
Steve, that's awesome. Thank you. And I want to say this to you from my heart, but I want the rest of the CAWG to hear it too. This team is doing work for us right now, and they're not getting paid yet. So this is awesome. Steve, keep doing the free work for us. I love that. But here's my question. So then following through the path that you just gave us, then in June, we'll have a budget request to ask for. And will that be fleshed out enough so that we will adequately be requesting the funds that we'll need for the next 2 years? Because that's how the state budgets. So
you're not going to ask something.
From the consultant's standpoint, I would say yes.
But following January.
Oh, sorry, Ann.
I'm just clarifying. In June, we've got to know how much we're going to ask for that the legislature will consider in January of 27. And then that, however much money they give us, will have to last through January of 29.
So, Ann, once we have the baseline and we know what the gaps are, I think the consultant team would be in a position to identify the resources we need to fill those gaps and to test certain scenarios, let's call them, to get where we need to be. What I would just suggest, though, obviously, as we produce information for all of you, your views may change. You may see new things that you want analyzed. When we engage the community, they might be the same way. So those types of budget needs, I think we'll have to make sure, like after the April meeting, that we have those fully accommodated. And as you all proceed through February and April, thinking about what you want, what you believe is important, and then CAG as a group deciding what it thinks is important can add to that budget request.
Is Rep. By or Senator Leas on anyone?
Are there any legislators?
None of them are? Okay. Get more insight there. I had one more question. Sorry to be late. I just want to step back for a minute. So the RFQ that they're on and the listing there, is that our scope of work or are we scoping the work now? Or the consultants?
We are scoping it now.
We're scoping the work now. Okay. So that's what we're doing at this point forward.
What was in the RFQ is what we will use to hire them.
Mm-hmm.
We've done that.
Okay.
So now we have to.
So what
tell them
we're doing right now is their scope of work.
Yes.
For us. Okay.
And it's meant to be on call, so there'll be multiple task orders. So it doesn't all have to be defined.
It's not all identified ahead of time for these on call.
Correct.
And if there's a change to that task order, then it goes.
Yeah, and this, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, this is kind of a funny interplay that we're going to have to figure out, but Allie, you just like walked right into it. Evan's the chair of the CAWG.
Mm-hmm.
This is the group that's deciding what to do. Evan's the guy in charge of that. But we have this funny disconnect just because of the way things work that I'm the manager of the contract with the consultants.
Mm-hmm.
So there shouldn't be any issues, but I just want to clarify that just in case, because there's contract rules and stuff that I'm going to have to follow. So there'll be like communication between the CAWG to me to the consultants. Hopefully that'll be smooth and nobody will even realize.
And the way that I anticipate that working is that in our open public meetings, we will agree on, come to a consensus vote. And then, then in between after and in between meetings, I get my job to interface with and with you all to carry out what the group has decided. So, it's a matter of setting the priorities and what we're going to do. We need to do that as a group. It's not the me project.
We'll just keep you sitting next to each other. It's fine.
So I think we were talking about this literature review. That's one of the things we're going to do, right? I think one of the things that you guys might want to include is this business about the Evergreen State College, Washington State Institute for Public Policy is developing a report that was directed by the legislature. It's in section 804 of ESB 5161, and they gave us a briefing on this a meeting or two ago, but their report is due December 31st. So whatever report you offer in February would be nice to have that information included.
And I just got an email from them this morning. They think we'll have a draft next week.
So what, So what is on here is the proposed scope.
So now, so the agenda, as we kind of wrote it up, was that these were thoughts that Hannah and I compiled on what we thought was likely, what were likely areas for emerging research that probably weren't already covered by somewhere that was going to exist in the existing literature. That's a complicated way of saying new work that needs to get done. But I didn't repeat in the agenda the entire text of 5161, which actually says what the legislature wants us to do. And because it would have made the agenda's, like 5 pages long. So, but that was just, topics that either are emerging or developing so rapidly that they're going to need fresh research, or just issues that weren't addressed at all by the CAC or any other prior group. Obviously, the Sea-Tac capacity issue is emerging. We can just buttonhole Laura for the next 3 hours and tell us all about that, or incorporate it into the project of the consultant. But yeah, so it's just thoughts about where that where we're likely to go once we review the literature.
Do I understand that we have somewhat instructed them now that by the next meeting that they will do this review for us of existing documents and get back to us with a brief, rather than 10,000 pages for us to read overnight, summary and a suggestion of to get to some of these other places between February and then April? Here are the things that they suggest that we need to start looking at. I mean, are we there yet, or are we still talking about what we want them to do?
Well, I think that there's more that we can talk about as far as what we want them to do. But yes, is the short answer, and the long answer is like yes and. Because I think that before we have a long list in the statute of groups to which we are asked to perform outreach. And I think that maybe one of the lessons of the CAC is that outreach needs to be ongoing and iterative in a conversation that brings the public along and explaining where we are, where we're going. And so that's, where your expertise comes in. The 5161 text, there's a half a dozen specific groups to reach out, groups of varying levels of specificity, communities, things to reach out to. And we should start doing that in parallel with all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think once we have a little bit more, maybe the next step, when we, you as a group kind of know exactly where you're going, the steps to get there. We kind of just mapped it out. Steve just mapped out and mapped out, over the next few months, how do we get to, from all of these great ideas, how do we start narrowing down and what that's going to look like? So I think once we have, a little bit clearer vision, I think everybody has such great ideas and all this. How do we get here? It's great when we get there, but the steps to get there, and I want to make sure that we include all of the stakeholders in the communities and we bring them in, but I don't want to bring them in, prematurely, and we don't have the right messaging for them, or it just opens a bunch of can of worms that we're not ready to address yet. And so I think the timing is going to be really critical on, when do we bring the people in, everybody that's interested in it, and what's the messaging? And then what is, what are we going to do with their questions? And until we have a few more concrete answers, and we'll get some of those from the baseline. It's not just, we don't want a free for all where everybody gets to come in. We really need to have kind of, keep our arms and some guardrails around what it is that we want from them, how they're going to be able to participate. You're going to have a lot of not in my backyard, but so I think we don't want to, kind of wrap our arms a bit around the scope and the scale and know what we're asking. If we're just going to tell people that this is what we're looking at, that's one thing. But, what does that two-way dialogue look like? And when do they get to participate? And then you all need to decide at some point, what information do they get to weigh in on? You want to hear their ideas, but are you going to use them? And how are you going to use them? And how is that? So that's, that's a few steps down the road, but we'll get there. And I definitely want to bring them along. I just want to be cognizant of, doing and not just where people hear snippets of things. that's just gonna really bog down your work that you're all doing?
Yes, and I want to make sure and bring them in early enough
Of course.
so that we get public guidance to where we go. Like one of the jobs that the legislature gave us was to look at ways of reducing the demand. So to me, that means shifting the demand for transportation to a different mode. So I want to hear from people like, would you be willing to take a train or, you know, an EV toll or, you know, like, I don't want the first time that people hear from this group to be, we're looking at building an airport in your backyard. I would much rather have the first thing be, how do you travel and how could it be better for you?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I think, you know, I want to make sure that we do, I know there's been a long list of specific stakeholders, but, you know, that we kind of map all of those stakeholders and really, you know, what is their communication path with us going to look like? You know, it's going to be very different. You all have your own individual, you know, relationships that you have, but the general community, you know, the difference of, you know, Beacon Hill is going to be a little bit different than Vashon. And, you know, so what does that communication overarching strategy look like? And then specific to each of the major players, if you will. And then what does that funnel down to? And where can they feed in and give us specific input? You know, where do we want their input? We want to hear, you know, we want it to guide us, but we want to make sure that we're smart in what we're asking and that we can take that information. Because it's really frustrating. You know, we've all been there where like, hey, we want to hear you. And so we share information and then it just goes, oh, great, thanks. You know, it goes nowhere. So I think we want to make sure that we set up a feedback loop and that we can follow along and circle through.
That actually, I had a thought in response to that, which is it's a survey that may already exist, but we may have to do if it doesn't already exist. Is that what would it take for you to consider? What do you think about when you travel? Why do you travel? What if an airport was this? If it's this much further away from where you live, would you take a train to get there? Would you drive? What would factor in? Is it only cost? Is it cost plus some other factors? It's the kind of thing that gets done as marketing research by airlines. I don't know if Sea-Tac has done that kind of marketing research for its own traveling populace. You know, because you're much more likely to hear from people who were, you know, I don't want a new airport built where I live, than the much more diverse and open-ended kind of views that might be out there for, I travel, I don't travel that much, I don't care that much how close I am to an airport versus I travel a ton, I care very much about how close I am, where I travel to, you know, all these sorts of factors. But before we start talking about can we drive 4 million passengers a year to walk across the bridge to Tijuana kind of solutions, we have to think about what does that look like here? You know,
and what are those options?
Yeah.
Right. You know, it would be, you know, I talked about kind of getting a little further down the road is, I mean, what are those options? To Anne's point, yes, you know, this is how I travel and this is, you know, how I want to engage and this is how I do, this is where I'm willing to travel. You know, to your point, it's what are their options? You know, they may not know their options. Well, as a matter of fact, I can tell you that the general populace, because I'm much more of the general populace than anyone here on this group. And I'm not even sure of all of my options. I'm like, oh, well, I guess there's, you know, if Travelocity just happens to have a flight out of Payne Field, then maybe I would consider it. No one's ever asked me my opinion on how I'm going to even get there, let alone that it is an option. So I think we have to do, and I think you said it, you know, some education of, you know, not just for this group, but overarching, you know, education on just what the future of travel can look like. I think there's a lot of opportunity for that.
So we don't have to do that by my big red flag June deadline?
No.
But by my big red flag June deadline, we need to have your ideas of how and when we're gonna do that, so.
Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest that in addition to the, the literature review baseline work, like this community engagement aspect, there could be an initial piece to run in parallel to identify the plan and the path to get there, and even start to look at some of the tools like a survey that could be used to gain some additional information. And then I see that input along with the literature review and merging to kind of define some of the next steps.
Yeah, because if the money that we asked for in 26 ultimately is going to have to carry that project through into 29, and at the same time, at our last meeting in Yakima, Representative Pai said we need the 0 to 5 year view as well as the 25-year view. It's 2025, that's 2029, that's about 4 years. And if the 5-year solution is get more people to fly out of Everett, then I mean that's kind of marching order 1 there.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it definitely ties together with, the baseline, but what, and I'll put together a plan of, what the engagement looks like with the stakeholders, who they are. I'll need some input from all of you because you know all the, players. But I think that's kind of the strategy that would make sense to sign off on and agree how that ties in with the baseline.
Let's go back to the question of the scope. If I could, how are we then, we've talked about a lot of things, but then narrowing it down, how are we getting back to what the scope is? Is that something that you're drafting or we're drafting, or that we're doing it right now as far as drafting that? Because it sounds like we're needing to progress pretty quickly here. And so whatever we're doing now, we need to have a general outline of what that scope looks like.
It's like, and what does WashDOT need? What level of specificity does WashDOT need from us to then be able to put it on paper to then actually effectuate with them?
It's not so much WashDOT, it's the legislature. So,
even before the budget request piece, like for the February meeting, for the April meeting, what?
Oh,
yeah,
scope. Yeah, we just need the scope, and like Mark's been talking about, a task order, which is like a mini contract. So, we want you to do this. They'll tell me how much it costs. We'll say, yeah, good. These are the deadlines. This is the deliverables, and then we'll know from there how much money we've got left. I think we've got enough money to get us through until the next budget, even if we have an aggressive, scope for you. So I'm not too worried about the near term. So yeah, that will be Mark and Ann effort.
Yeah, just to further develop that, with some of the guidelines that we're hearing, right? The literature review and some of the comments, right? And then there'll be drafts back and forth to make sure that we're hitting the mark on that scope, and then we'll put a fee in a schedule and deliverables, like Ann said.
And then does that come back to the CAWG to then give final approval, or is that something that you give approval for, or you give approval for?
I mean, I think we'll need to decide. I mean, obviously, February meetings are next meeting, so we're going to have to leave here with here's the scope of work for February, and here's probably the scope of work for April, and then June can be what the gaps. It can be a little fuzzy, but trying to plan at least 2 meetings ahead. And that can include too, I mean, in my mind, that can include still bringing in other people to speak to us. So like the DoD people, or like the Cascadia High-Speed Rail people, or whoever you think you want to feed in.
Yeah, and that can go on in parallel, right? It doesn't have to be directly related to something we're doing, right? But yeah, it should help it, right?
Yeah.
But I'm seeing it a little bit different than what I just heard you say, Evan, because we'll be negotiating basically this mini contract, and that'll probably go on beyond June. So that doesn't mean we have to have a set agenda for every meeting. But we'll definitely be putting together a task order for a lot of work beyond just the next 2 months.
Okay, so you're not gonna break it down meeting by meeting, it's gonna be
No.
bigger and then,
Yes.
okay,
Like, for example, I'm thinking that there'll be a task order for public engagement. There'll be a separate task order for, literature review. Then there'll be a separate task order for new research, so it'll be broken down by topic.
Yeah.
Rather than by timeline.
And I think we would identify target meetings where you're gonna get either an update or the result of that effort, right? So, and that's how the agendas would be built. But I guess, Ann, what I was saying is not every agenda the full agenda doesn't have to necessarily be our work. It could be another speaker or something that's been identified along the way that would help to inform the process, not something that is necessarily under our direct work.
Right.
As those get identified. And I think that would help the process, right, and moving things forward.
I was just gonna bring up, my understanding, high level of the scope now is it's based on task order. So right now, we're talking about a task order that'll include, public involvement and literature research. Somewhere between now and next few months, someone's gonna look at the bill that gave us an assignment of what we need to cover. And within that bill, all those items that the legislature wants us to look at will fall within a given task order somehow. And you have to come up with what that's going to cost within each task order. And then by June, we're going to go talk to the legislation and, put in a request. That could be a lot of unfunded requests in there. So at that point, we come back and we look at that again, right? To say, okay, so what's this low hanging fruit in the bill that we're really going to work on?
yeah.
Am I thinking correctly?
Yeah, except that I think that there's so much in 5161 that's necessarily gonna be the multi-year. These are gonna be questions that aren't answered until that 27, 29.
Well, yeah, but we're talking 29, or we're already talking 29.
Yes.
But by June, we're asking for money to work through 27, 28.
Right, to answer all those questions, but the short-term answers are the two that I
agreed.
Agreed. Yeah.
That's where we start. That's where we start.
But when you ask for money, isn't it good to say, legislature, these are the things you want us to cover, and we've costed out for us to look at this, and here are the numbers. Wow, they're big. But we're answering your questions, legislature.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rather than just say, yeah, we'll get to those other things the next time. Put it all out front and ask them up front. If they say you can only have this month, okay, well then these are the ones we'll cut out.
Yeah.
That's how you have to treat them. Pardon the legislature.
Well, they're not here.
They're in touch.
Well, sometimes they get online, but
Okay.
So I have a question. I've had my hand for a while.
Yeah. Oh, I'm calling you. Sorry, you're on a screen that's to my right here, so I'm pointing at you. But please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Great discussion. I'm feeling more solid with what I'm hearing. My question then is, where do we, within that timeline, when do we bring in the customer tolerance survey that you folks were talking about?
Oh, what I was saying, like the idea of trying to find out from the public what they think, in a more formal way than just general outreach.
I was hearing you say earlier that it was going to be more of a customer service. What are you willing to do? Are you willing to travel? Go blah blah blah, that kinds of stuff. Because there's two parallel tracks, right? One is the technical that we're doing, the review we're doing. Where are the spaces that are excluded? Where are now the spaces that are included? And within this integrated system of long-term and short-term travel, what's the logical thing to do? And what other connectors do we need? And so within that, the question, I would imagine that the tolerances of the traveling public would influence what recommendations we make. So just in the planning stage, it sounded like it would not be in the early part, but much later on, possibly next year, after we get a really strong sense of what are the real probable sites or combination of multimodal we're going to be looking at as a plate of recommendations, and then refine that further with, for lack of a better term, the traveling customers, the communities that will be out there.
Yeah, that's where I guess my thought was, it's possible this has already been done in the context of Sea-Tac capacity discussion. Yes. But if it hasn't, or if it's too old to be useful, then maybe that is a very specific ask we can make of the legislature to fund for the 27-29 cycle of, as part of public outreach for the CAWG, for demand projection and planning, we actually want to find out what people in Western Washington think about their travel needs broadly, and not just rely on public comment inbound, and then design that survey with some guardrails. We're not going to give people the option in a survey to say, we want to build a floating airport in the middle of Puget Sound, because that's not going to happen from
I get it, Chair. I get the what. I'm just asking.
Yeah. Well, so we narrow down the guardrails, and then we give guardrails for that to design a survey that's then meaningful and useful, that helps us get to the end point.
And I think I'll just add that, that would be part of that engagement strategy. So an initial task order would be to get the engagement and understanding of that, right, and put together that plan for doing that. As getting started, there's a lot of pent up things, right, that we want to just dive into, not just from the legislation, but from these conversations. We get us started, right? Like, get us started to start feeding you some information, the literature review, the baseline. We can put some costs at some of these other items so that you have that at your ready, and then that's going to inform you and to make other decisions and give us additional guidance that we can add on to a task order. We can change a task order. We can develop a new task order, right? So, let's just sometimes this guy gets started, right, and then we'll get there. Not try to, the end game is still important, right? Why we're doing this, but we're getting there. I'm hearing we're getting there in this conversation. Yeah. And as we get some of these initial pieces going, that'll help build the momentum.
It also occurs to me that it's possible that a survey like we're talking about has been done in San Diego or New England.
We did one in New England. We have propensity to travel.
Yeah.
Survey, right. So that'll inform. Yeah.
If you assume the populations are comparable and the attitudes are comparable, then you can say, here's what people are generally willing to do. Here's what people aren't willing to do.
Yeah. And then from there, if we can take some of this that, we've done in the past, then we can kind of refine it down. We've mentioned Payne, we had a discussion earlier on, what's it going to take to get people to go to Payne Field? Then we know that, these are the groups that are more likely and willing to travel. Here's the drivers that will encourage them to go. Everyone mentioned the, carrot, stick, or the grease, and it may be a combination of all of those to, get to the recommendation. So I think we can just keep refining it down, and I know it feels a little like we're nailing Jello to a wall right now, but I think it's just gonna, we'll just get tighter and tighter and tighter until you know exactly what you need from, the public and from communities in order to come back with a solid recommendation. And you'll be able to offer them enough information that they are making informed decisions.
Yeah, we don't want to get there and be like, we should ask them that in that survey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. It is 2:00. But I had this on here, I think, till 2:15. Yeah. 2:15 is public comment.
We get a recap.
That was an accident, but yeah, it says, this part is till 2 PM and then 2:15, the public comment starts. So
Yes.
did you put this in as a wind down?
Yeah, well, actually, I just saw, so there's some hands, and then there's also, there were a couple of comments in the chat. That I think Ben just typed a comment in the chat that popped up and then went away before I had a chance to read it completely.
Yeah, Eddie, can you
Yeah,
show
yeah.
the everyone chat?
My comment was just in response to Steve's suggestion that the guardrails that we would want to include would not cross the NEPA threshold. And I would just say, I think the timeline of this group and the level of recommendations in terms of their scope is probably such that we would not want to do that. We would want to consider options that may require some type of environmental approval, and just note that as a dependency in whatever we're ultimately looking at.
That achieves my goal of explicit consideration. Thank you.
I did, in my own thinking ahead of the meeting, come up with a short list of what I think are very likely gaps in the literature. We know what the gaps are once we look literature, but the ones that things I thought that we're going to need to know about, but that are very likely not covered, or not covered in the work of the CAC or any real local or pre-existing work, would be the emerging tech, things like the sustainable fuels and electric, emerging information about demand. So, how much has travel recovered post-COVID, business travel? I know that I travel a lot less than I used to. With things like video conferencing. The newest and latest capacity projections from places like Everett and Yakima, Bellingham. Whether, because the CAC did not study them, we don't formally know what the capacity and expansion plans are in Vancouver and Portland, but the legislature's asked us to look at them. And yeah, those were the quick list I made for myself on information that's not in the record.
So, Mr. Chair, kind of as a response to Ali's question, because we've got, what now, 10 minutes to wrap this up. I think that I have enough for between now and the February meeting to negotiate a task order enough to get these guys started, like probably within a week of putting together this information and having a robust agenda for February. And then we can go on from there. You guys are nodding, so that sounds hopeful.
Yep, late February, right?
Well, we'll set up the meeting.
Yeah. that is the after public comment is the set next meetings block of time.
Is there work being done in January? This is like scope 1 would be January, February. Right. Okay. Yes. Scope 2 is then February or March and April.
Well, I think,
which brings us to
it'll even be beyond that.
But we have to have something by January.
Yes.
Okay. So if we do scope 1, January, February, scope 2, March, April, then that gives us to May, June, because we have to have a draft before the final in June, correct?
I'm not envisioning it as discrete scopes like that. It'll more likely be as individual scopes based on topic rather than timing that will probably go for many, many months. Like, meeting planning and prep, that can go on until.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I think there's going to be some that transcend meetings. There's going to be some that maybe be for a specific meeting.
Right.
We don't want to have 20 different scopes going on. But on the same hand, I think there's going to be things that are going on in parallel, and we'll either be completing a scope at a meeting or we'll be giving you an update on the status of it. That would help keep you informed of how it's progressing.
But the goal is for this report in June is what you're helping us with, right? We're not doing it. That's part of their.
Yeah, and that, so the June deadline, that's not the report.
Okay.
That's the budget.
Or the budget, sorry,
So,
budget
yes.
report.
Yeah, but I do want you guys, like, at the June meeting, I want that to be one of the agenda items is for the work group to see and buy off on the budget request. Because, here's a little bit of inside how it works. I'm not really allowed to talk to the legislature. So when it comes time to present this before the legislature and maybe attend budget hearings and answer questions, I'm expecting you all to be doing that.
Yeah.
So I hope that you understand it and support it when you get to that point.
There's a hand up there.
No, that's public. That's.
Yeah, it's a public comment hand, I think.
Just as a, I know this is ridiculous, but I know some people get worked up with this, the word scope and task, which I'm already like worked up with it. So we're really gonna have tasks.
Some
right?
people like Charlie
me,
Reardon.
yeah. So each one of these is going to be tasks. They're not going to be scope. We have one huge scope that is broken down into tasks. And we're gonna, like, I suspect we need some form of motion to have them begin, have you negotiate task one. Is that correct? Or are we already past that point? You just tell you to go on task, they negotiate task one, let's begin work on that. Or do I make a motion to say, like, you have approval to work on task one?
Well, you know, we, if you want to make a motion, so it's on the record that essentially the past hour of discussion has been taking notes is essentially our instruction to them to proceed with that word. Yeah.
I second.
Seconded. Okay. Second, any discussion on the motion as presented? All right, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. Okay.
Great. Good work.
Do you understand what task one is?
Meeting.
Don't get started. I move to adjourn.
Well, we got public comment in 8 minutes, so we can certainly take a break between now and then. So if you want to amend your motion to adjourn.
So amended.
Okay. All right, let's, we'll take a break till 2:15 and we'll come back on with public comment. All right, it's 2:15, call everybody back to order, and Stina's gonna log on the public comment.
Okay. See, so we will now start the public comment portion of this meeting. We'll have 30 minutes for public comment, and each person has 2 minutes to speak, and we do have a timer you'll see on the screen. I don't think there's anyone from the public in person, so we'll do all online right now. If you'd like to comment, please raise your hand using the hand raise tool in the reaction section. And I will unmute you after I call your name. So it looks like the first person is Dylan. You should be able to unmute yourself, Dylan.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, got a lot going on here at the house today. So I live in Thurston County outside of Lacey, technically Olympia. And I've been a participant in this process since close to the beginning, going back to 2021, when our area was selected as a so-called greenfield site by the your predecessor, the CAWG, which was disbanded in infamy at the end of their process. And so, yeah, I've been trying to track what's been happening with this new iteration of the effort to improve our transportation, including by adding an airport. And I'm a little concerned about a couple of things. And I actually have not so much comments as questions that I think would be nice to have responses to. I'll send these to the website as well so that they can be followed up on. But First, I would like to ask that no more of these meetings be conducted until the entire CAWG has been convened. And so I guess my question would be, why are meetings happening if the entire group hasn't been convened? The second question I would like to ask is that every member of the CAWG sign a conflict of interest statement that assures the public they will not personally benefit from the activities of the CAWG. I work for the state, and every year I have to sign a lengthy statement that assures the public that I don't personally benefit from my work that I do for the state. Every one of you needs to do that as well. I would also like to ask that the CAWG refrain from producing or publishing a list of proposed sites until the complete group is convened and you guys have ensured the public that a fair and inclusive process will be used to select such sites. As you saw with the CAC selection of greenfield type sites or any physical real site as a place for a new airport upsets the public greatly.
Thank you, Dylan. Next up is Jane, and you should be able to unmute yourself.
All right, try to turn my camera on as well. Hello. So I've attended every one of these meetings as well as I think Dylan did, and usually in person. And I thank all of you for actually volunteering your time to be here and work on this important topic. I think there's two things that you might do to make this meeting a little more, just to demonstrate some progress. Add two. Yeah, thank you. I think you should add two segments to the regular agenda. Segment number one would be a public comments response. We never hear any of your responses to any of our questions or comments, although you mentioned a couple times today, hey, we're going to reach out to the public. Well, the public's here. There's at least 20 of us here at every one of your meetings, on Zoom at least, right? So respond to us in a segment in the agenda, like spend a couple minutes to say, hey, in the last meeting we heard these things and here's some comments, here's some input. The other thing you could do is add another segment to the agenda that summarizes what we've learned so far. You've had a lot of great technical speakers come to the meeting, and some of them gave some great ideas, and you talked about a few things. And okay, what happened to that? It would be awesome if you could say, hey, in the last meeting, in the last several meetings, we heard these 10 things, and we're going to make some actions on 1 and 2 maybe, and here's where we stand on those things. So again, add 2 segments to the meeting, one that is about public comments and your response to them for the last meeting, and then a summary of what we've learned so far. Thank you.
Thank you, James. All right. Looks like Ursula is next, and you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ursula Euler. I live in Thurston County, and I want to ask, because county internet is often unstable, I would like to ask if you can hear me all right.
Yes.
Thank you. I've been a long observer for many years, just as the previous 2 speakers, and have 2 main points to make this afternoon. Despite my great disappointment in the work and the contributions and the discussion of this group so far, my first point is you keep talking about demands and forecasted capacity shortfalls. I again will question those. They are not natural demand or natural capacity shortfalls. They are produced. That's a produced demand, an induced demand. Please explain in future meetings how the airline industry has done that over the last 20, 30, and 40 years. I do not see any reason to continue that under climate goals, and that brings me to my next point. A customer survey of which you are speaking should not just ask questions about aviation and flying. It should bring those into context with public health information at airport communities and also climate information and true climate information, not propaganda that you are supporting through sustainable aviation fuels, for example. But as Ms. Battaiola already pointed out several minutes ago, Seattle's greenhouse gas inventory is close to 25% from their airports, for example. Disclose that in your surveys, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ursula. Let's see. I did see James raised his hand again. Chair, would you like me to unmute him or?
Well, is there anyone else?
No.
Waiting. I'll put that actually to the group. We typically only allow one public comment per speaker, but we also, the reason why we couldn't hear twice.
Be magnanimous.
All right. All right. Yeah, we can, let's Mr. Pearson add some more.
Okay. James, you should be able to unmute yourself if you'd like to make another comment.
Thanks for taking my second statement. One of the links in the chat pointed to an airport statistics page. It goes to 2023, and I think as most of you know, Sea-Tac and some of the other airports stopped publishing their statistics publicly anyways. I think it would be great if you guys could actually use some of your influence to get those statistics turned back online so that we can all see it. They only go out to 2023. Yeah, if there's something there that goes to 2024 or up to the current date, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, James. All right. I don't see any more hands raised. So I think this concludes the public comment.
Okay. All right. Thank y'all.
Could we ask the man, do you publish it? I think you do.
I don't know what information has been addressed, what statistics. We have a lot of information on the website. It's a huge amount of information we put on the website, so I'm not sure what information has been referred to.
The FAA publishes the passenger traffic every single day for every airport in the United States, at least what crosses TSA lines.
Yeah.
So it's out there.
I'm not sure what information you've been talked about. What data, what information, what statistics.
I've put the FAA link in the chat.
Okay.
Chair, Sea-Tac Airport does publish their flight operations because I looked it up. 2024 was 430,000. So I'm just looking for the link and I'll put it on the chat. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to, I mean, one of the public commenters is there a method for us to respond to some of these public comments? I have to say I've responded personally to a couple, but I don't know that we have a group policy, or do we, about should we, I mean, incidentally, we do get copies of all the public comments in writing from WashDOT, and thanks for doing that, Christina. But we don't, to my knowledge, have a established policy about responding to those as a group.
Right. And I mean,
or should we?
Yeah, I do think while we don't have here's us responding to the specific comments, it does shape the development of the agenda and the discussions that we have amongst us at the meetings. Because I know that, like earlier when I was introducing our 1 o'clock session about suggesting that, picking up where the CAC left off and factoring in weaknesses of the identified sites, i.e. the community sentiment about them. That's very clearly a response to public comment. Also we publish 2 annual reports. They're brief, but certainly we made an express recommendation to the state legislature about sound transit, and we also included in there a summary of when telling the legislature, but also telling the public what we've been doing within the last year or so. And a summary of what we've learned, boiled down to 1 page.
And then if I could just interject, I do get some questions to the commercial aviation work group email, and sometimes I do respond, but sometimes they are asking specific members for answers, and I do forward those to members at times, or I ask the members and then they tell me I can relay it back. There have been times where I've done that, just as an FYI.
Can I ask process?
Yeah.
How is this going to work with the consultants as well? Is it the same process that we're doing now? Sorry.
Oh.
As far as for comments relaying to us, emails, things like that, is it the same process coming through?
Oh, like
WashDOT and Christina and.
You mean if there's public comments that are like questions for the consultants? Yeah, same process.
Okay.
Looks like Maria has her hand up.
Oh yeah, Maria.
Yeah, I just want to recommend a process we use in other citizen-led groups. One is that we're able to track it and just reflect very quickly on the website. If it's a comment as opposed to a question, so for example, the question regarding conflict of interest, I think that is something very important for transparency to any and every person who wants to engage with this work, that we go ahead and be able to respond to that, because that is a real key. As far as continuing to convene without a full quorum, I think, again, we need to be transparent and just say what the messages we've received as to continuing the work, so that everybody gets on the same page, or at least they can find a place at our website to look for the responses to those important questions.
So I think we should, we could move on to unless anyone else has anything else to discuss right now, we can move on to the set next meetings portion.
Chair, I would appreciate it if a small group comes up with some thinking on this and recommendation to the full group for next time, because these are critical practices. If we don't start sharing with the public how we operate, the expectations could be all over the place. And I think we just need to be, again, transparent and accountable to them also. So I'd appreciate a small group that can work on this.
We hired somebody. Right. So we have, Maria, do you want to work with Vicki and then anyone else who wants to work with that on kind of developing our public outreach program? Because I was saying, this is something that kind of has to start and kind of be iterative.
Yeah, I would be willing to. I think the scope might be narrower from my end, which is the public response. So expectations are clear. I appreciate it. Love to work with you.
Mr. Chair, I just like to follow on that is like, I believe as far as the, no conflict of interest, we all signed that work to join this committee and took a test to pass the test to say that we wouldn't do that. So that part, all of us should be aware of that we did it. Okay.
Yeah.
I forgot the second thing I was going to say. That's all.
However, the public may not be aware of that.
Well,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Christina's going to be part of that group too.
Okay. Oh, yeah,
And she's the master of the website.
I can help. Or I'll assist if needed.
Yeah, and I'll be working with them, so.
Okay.
Yeah, you have like a frequently asked questions thing on there.
Yeah, I'll show you the website.
Okay.
We do. The frequently asked questions tends to grow too.
We can
So
build
we
on
get
it,
more
right?
frequently asked questions.
Yeah, and I think some of that we could cover, you know, the housekeeping of how you're all on here, you know, what does that look like? And then that kind of checks some of, you know, that covers some of the questions. And I think there are some opportunities for, you know, Maria brought up, you know, kind of what the two-way feedback looks like. Because this group, I've sat here now all day and I can tell you this group is very committed to outreach and making sure the community's heard. And the community's here. We have 20 people that have spent the majority of their day to see what you're all doing. So I think that, I mean, there's a lot of, obviously a lot of opportunity, but everybody's so willing to do it. I think now it's just, you know, what is that? What does the structure look like?
All right, so we should set our February meeting. This is the part where everyone gets their calendars out.
Could I make a request right up front that it's not on the week of the 8th of February? Just to get it out front.
You request anything.
There's a large aviation conference that's going to be.
Yeah. And the week of the 16th is President's Week, which is a Seattle schools week off. So, so this puts us either the first week of February or the last week of February. And I know that you all were asking for more time.
Benefit us given that, you know, we still don't have the contract yet as well, right? So we're willing to continue to develop some stuff and move forward. I think that week of the 23rd might be ideal.
Yeah, can we do Tuesday the 24th then?
Maybe.
Back into February is good for those of us who come over the pass, so every week helps going closer to spring.
Yeah, if there's any snow this year. I mean, February 24th is a day.
It is a day.
It is a day. Let me get something real quick.
Is it an okay day?
Works for me.
Yep.
I assume that would be west of the Cascades somewhere. How about Moses Lake?
Then you'd wanted to lay
That's
this
not west of the Cascades.
I was gonna say, but then you guys would want to late as possible for coming to my way too.
Summer is a good time to visit you.
Summer is a good time to visit us. There was I hate to say this because somebody just is not in the room at the moment, but we've had several people ask about Seattle terminal capacity. And so if the meeting is at Sea-Tac, then there's air service and we can drive there and maybe we can prevail upon them to maybe I know today that some of the board's going to get to do a tour of Boeing Field, which I highly recommend doing. But since there were questions specifically about terminal capacity, then perhaps a meeting at Sea-Tac, and then if they would be so kind to do a discussion of their terminal expansion plans.
I think it'd be good to do that somewhere other than around Sea-Tac because of the congestion. But the place we met in Olympia is fine. I thought that was a nice facility.
I've been to meetings at Sea-Tac before. If they're, I don't want to speak out of turn, but they have hosted for like the Washington Airport Management Association.
They have great facilities.
They absolutely have great facilities, and
they give you free parking.
Yes,
they have free parking,
and they will validate your parking.
Yes,
and they have restaurants.
One time.
Yeah, and yet they have multiple modes to get there. You can get there by driving, or by plane, or by train. So we put our money where our mouth is.
So we waited for RF to leave before inviting him to host us.
Yep. Well, I did not mean to do that, but
for me, it's easy. I prefer Sea-Tac over Olympia because it's just a lot easier to get into for me.
That was booked, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will be happy to put the squeeze on them. I have.
You know some people.
I do know some.
Yes. Oh, there he is.
Oh, come back. We just volunteered you for something.
You want a meeting at the airport?
Yeah.
How do you know? You can send me some dates. I would have to check. You know, we're
24th of February.
Yeah, it would have to be in a conference center, and I would have to check to see if anyone else has booked the conference center, etc. So I can't give you an answer right now.
Sure.
I'm happy to look at it, get back to you if you wouldn't mind just emailing me the dates and time.
Cool.
Yeah, I told you I knew somebody.
That's right. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
So tentatively at Sea-Tac on the 24th.
24th.
If there is
If
availability.
there's availability.
And if we had a backup date, the 25th or the 26th?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Sorry,
so-
I have to rush. I've got to.
Okay, you're good.
Are we still thinking?
Yeah,
it's
new work.
When
Thank
it
you.
be and all?
Meeting there or having them?
Meeting this.
Oh.
At JBLM?
Uh-huh.
Oh, no, thank you.
No, you don't want to do the JBLM.
No, you don't.
Too hard.
Just to get on the basis.
Yeah, there's no reason to be on the
Enough
base, yeah.
complication.
You want them to come down?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's so.
Well, and they did specifically tell us that is the way it has to happen, that we need to make a formal request from CAWG and then they will respond to that request. I mean, affirmatively, but we've never officially invited them yet. But trust me, someone who goes on and off that base probably 2 or 3 times a year.
It's not easy.
It's complicated.
I'd show my ID.
You don't want to have to do that. Well, yeah, you've got.
You'd be to get by myself.
You've got
there's no reason to be on the base. They can come to our place wherever it is.
Yeah.
All right. So we have dates. We have a tentative location for February. Do we want to set a tentative April date just for planning purposes?
Not a bad idea, sir. Let's see.
So Seattle school spring break
As
is
I say,
the 13th to the 17th. So
what are spring breaks? When is Easter? What are the dates around? Look at
Easter's the 5th.
of May,
April.
of April. Yeah,
It is early.
it is early. Okay. What do you say was school's on?
Seattle school spring break is the 13th to the 17th.
Okay, so we're looking like third
or
week in-
fourth
third or
week of
fourth week in
April.
April. Yeah,
Probably that 4th week of April.
27th.
that would kind of mirror what we're doing with February.
No, I was saying the week of.
Oh, the weekend, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not on a Monday.
How about the 28th?
So 28th.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. And we won't worry about a location yet. It's just, but we can pencil it in.
April 28th, we're talking about.
We will pencil
It'll be sunny somewhere.
somewhere.
Like Moses Lake?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm happy to do that.
It's a good time of year for it. It's not too hot.
Pass will be fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I will tentatively book it for the day.
Can you say that date again, please?
April 28th.
Got it.
Would that be at the Moses Lake Airport?
Affirmative.
Okay.
At the terminal.
Okay.
Yep, happy to host.
Same time, right? 10 o'clock?
Mhm.
Okay. You should be able to get Representative Denver.
I think, yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah.
What was the February date again?
24th.
Thank you.
Tentative until
Do we,
RF can check on availability at the conference center.
Chair, I also say to hold February 25 and 26. Is that still true?
As the backup in case the Sea-Tac conference center is unavailable on the 24th. All right. Anything else, or is there a motion to adjourn?
Sorry, last item real quick.
Sure.
You know, harp on this. So you're gonna then have a draft of their scope, and you're gonna notify us, one of you, as far as when they're officially on?
Yes.
So we know. Okay. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And we have identified the problem with my CAWG email address. So that when you all reply to me, it's going to be fixed. It should be fixed today. So we have identified the problem.
I really thought it was me.
Yeah, it is. It was a typo in how the account was set up. Typo in the address. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Awesome.
Recording stopped.